Happy Thanksgiving! I hope you all had a wonderful day, ate a lot of turkey. I cooked I was very proud of myself. I actually think I cooked the best Thanksgiving I've ever cooked in my life this year. I made it super simple. I just did turkey and stuffing and potatoes and gravy, of course, because you can't have Thanksgiving without gravy. Gravy is like the best part, but it actually came out I was very proud of myself. Really, really, really good. And I may or may not have been drinking for like the last 4 or 5 hours. So this really bodes well for you guys today. But guys, welcome to Nitwits. Now, this was not the original plan that I had for today. This was you guys are commenting on my hat. Yeah, I'll talk about the hat in a second. Yes, I made the hat. Maybe I shouldn't admit that, but I did. Anyway, this was not the stream I was supposed to have today. I was ready to go. I was fired up. Adam promised us yesterday that he would tell us the story today. When he was supposed to tell it to us yesterday, he was like, no, I'm going to do it today. And then, of course, like half an hour before he was supposed to go live, he said, no, not today. Not today. I can't possibly. You are all spending time with your loved ones today. I will have to tell you the story tomorrow. But don't worry. It's going to be a big show tomorrow. No jams. Big show. Story time. And so I have, per my professional obligations to all of you and to this platform, rescheduled the Will Adam Chicken Out stream tomorrow. We will be doing this. I will follow Adam until he fucking tells this story, no matter what. I don't care how he feels about it. Facts don't care about your feelings, Adam. It's time to spill the beans. And yes, thank you, Mark Robichaud, who's basically like an Adam. Adam, you have held on to this story for so long that Mark Robichaud is defecting from your channel and he's coming to mine. That's how serious this is, Adam. You need to tell the story, Adam. So we will check in with that tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. Everyone clear their schedule. And we'll see if Adam finally spills the beans. And if he does, and listen. Like, I know this might sound weird, but I am actually on Adam's side on this one. I actually do think that Adam is right. I think that Adam was treated horribly by Tim. I think that it was bullshit how the whole thing went down. I just think Adam needs to tell the story, but I am actually on Team Adam in this particular occasion. I am not against him. I think he is right on every single level. And I just want to hear him tell the story. So we're gonna see. What happened. Patrick, you're gonna have to watch the full 7-hour stream that I did, because if you watch the full 7-hour stream that I did, it's gonna become pretty clear. I promise you. I promise you. Like, I don't mind Adam. I don't think he's a bad person. I think that he's kind of dumb about the way he goes about things sometimes, but I don't actually think he's a bad person. I think what he did to me was fucked up. I think he should apologize and own up to what he did. I don't think he should be lying on Twitter about things that I've said about him. But in general, I'm actually on Team Adam here. So I'm anxious to hear the story. I actually want to know what happened. But sadly, we are going to have to wait until tomorrow for that. But never fear. Never fear. I have something else planned, because my community has been asking me to watch this John Doyle, Hunter Avallone debate ever since it happened. And so tonight, ladies and gentlemen, on this episode of Nitwits, we are going to be watching the gender roles debate between John Doyle and Hunter Avallone, which took place in person, apparently. The debate is over 2 hours long, which means this stream could go on for a while. Basically, if like you have a 15-minute video for me to react to, that's probably going to take me about 2 hours to react to that. So we could conceivably be here all night. I hope you all have some beer or some wine or something harder or more illegal, like, whatever floats your boat. I'm not one to judge, but I'm just saying we could be here a while, and everyone just needs to get used to that idea. It's the way it goes. I sometimes have a lot to say, but there's a special reason that my community wanted me to react to this debate specifically. And that is because tonight we are honoring Locals member John Morgan. John wrote a fan fiction about John Doyle and Hunter Avallone. Yes, it's one of those types of fan fictions. And if you feel so inclined to read that fan fiction, I have pinned it to the top of the chat. I have posted it in the description on the video so that you can access and enjoy John Morgan's fanfic about Hunter Avallone and John Doyle. Don't say I didn't warn you. Like, if you wanted to post this fan fiction in either of their discords just to rile up their communities and to make them like a bunch of leftists, like you might have some fun with that. So that is pinned to the top of the chat in the description. Our homage today to you, John Morgan. Thank you for entertaining us in locals. Now, who are these people? Well, if you used to be a fan of Sassy Saturday, and guys, just so you know, Alex was like this close to joining the stream tonight. He was. Alex was this close to joining me tonight. Alex of Sassy Saturday fame. And we may see Alex again yet in a future episode of Nitwits, or maybe even a revival of Sassy Saturday. We'll have to see. But if you were fans of Sassy Saturday, we used to watch John Doyle and or Hunter Avallone like probably for half of our Sassy Saturdays, because it's just so like there's so much cringe involved. Now, between the two of them, John Doyle, this is not like any other episode of Nitwits. And because like the episodes of okay, I've only done 2 episodes of Nitwits so far, and they were both about Chrissy Mayer, which was a mistake in and of itself. But John Doyle is actually extremely smart. Some people might not like me saying that, but that's the truth. John Doyle is extremely smart. John Doyle also has a giant stick up his ass that probably needs to be surgically removed at some point, but John Doyle is extremely smart. This is not a Chrissy Mayer situation. I do legitimately think that he has a lot of potential and promise. He's just got to get over this like the 50s were awesome mentality, and I think he's going to be just fine. Hunter Avallone, I don't think he's as smart as John Doyle. I think that Hunter Avallone doesn't really know what he believes. And part of that is because he grew up on the internet, which is a mistake in and of itself. But I don't really think that Hunter Avallone has a good sense of what he personally believes. And I think that shows. He changes his position all the time. I don't think Hunter Avallone generally does a really good job in debates that I've seen him in. So I'm kind of curious to see how this is all going to go down. But like, I want to say this. I'm actually not really a fan of like either of these two people. I just happen to think that John Doyle is significantly smarter than Hunter Avallone. And so we're going to see, though, if they make good points, I will acknowledge that they make good points. If they don't make good points, it is what it is. Mark Robichaud says the fanfic is actually nonfiction. Well, that is yet to be seen, Mark, isn't it? We'll have to see. So, guys, we're going to be watching tonight this debate between John Doyle and Hunter Avallone, and we're going to get into that in a second. But because this is Nitwits, I do have to show you my knitting, and I will be knitting throughout the stream today. So I'm going to show you my knitting. But before I show you that, I just want to do a few quick programming notes. Number one, the stream with Adam spilling the beans tomorrow will not be my only stream, because I already had a couple of things scheduled. Number one, I have tomorrow at 2 p.m. on my main channel, 2 p.m. right here. I will be talking to Mr. Jack Casey. Jack Casey is a flat earther, and he is going to try to convince me that the earth is flat. And I'm really looking forward to that. Jack Casey is actually a really creative person. He's a libertarian. He's extremely creative. He's an author. He has written all these great books about like vampires and like witches and like all of these things. And so I'm actually really interested to have this flat earth conversation with Jack Casey. And I think it'll be a nice light kind of like post-holiday conversation to have. That's going to be at 2 p.m. tomorrow on my main channel. And then at 5 p.m. tomorrow, I think, though the scheduling might get a little tricky, I think at 5 p.m. tomorrow on my second channel, youtube.com/actively unwoke, we are still going to do happy hour which is my regular Friday stream. It just might be a little bit of an abbreviated happy hour because, of course, tomorrow at around about 6:30, we're going live to watch this stream, whether Adam likes it or not, and I don't really care. It is time for Adam to talk, and I want to see it tomorrow at 6:30. So it's going to be a busy day tomorrow, guys. You thought you were getting an easy Black Friday? No, 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 no. We're gonna be going all night tomorrow, all day and all night, as it looks right now. Good thing I always have lots of knitting to keep me busy. Mark Robichaud says, I've watched their OnlyFans. I'm partly blind now. Mark, I don't know why you would do that. I really don't know. One more programming note, guys, before I get into my knitting and then we get started on this here stream, is that I want to let you know that in my supporter Discord on Sunday night, we will be watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Movie night this week is hosted by Jennifer. Movie night is basically now a weekly event in my supporter Discord where we get together at 8 p.m. on Sunday and we watch a movie. We've watched so many great movies. We watched Soylent Green. We watched 1984, V for Vendetta, Poltergeist, The Thing. What do we watch this? We've watched Coraline. What the heck did we watch this past week? I can't even remember anymore. I don't even remember. Oh, They Live. We watched They Live, of course. Like an awesome movie. And this week we're going to be watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind in my supporter Discord. There are a lot of ways you can join my supporter Discord. Number one is by becoming a member on this here YouTube channel. If you become a member on my channel, I will send you out the Discord link for you to join as part of your channel membership. So that's one option. A couple other options are to find my Patreon. What the heck is going on? That's a problem I'll fix later. My Patreon, go to youtube.com/activelyunwoke and you'll find links to my Patreon or to my Substack or to my locals. Might I recommend joining my locals if you want to become a supporter? Locals tends to be where I'm the most active, where you're going to get the most interaction from me, things like that. Locals is $5 a month, $50 for the year. You can also make a one-time gift. All of those will get you into the supporter Discord, or you could join via Patreon anywhere from $5 a month all the way up to $250 a month, depending on how much you like my knitting on any given day, I suppose. And all of those things will get you 2 Zoom calls every single week that are private, that are not recorded, where sometimes I spill the tea months or even years ahead of when I do it on YouTube. So those are really fun calls to be a part of. We do them on Mondays and Wednesdays. We also do weekly movie nights. We do bitch crafts. We do book clubs. We're doing all sorts of cool stuff in my community. So you can join on Patreon or locals or by becoming a member on my channel. And you can find out all the information in the description below if you want to do any of those things. All right. Before we get in, no. Has anyone ever seen this movie? Mark Robichaud, you are trying to traumatize all of us. I could only get through half of this movie. And I've seen some fucked up shit in my day. I could only get through half of this movie. I had to turn it off. That's how awful that movie is. We will never watch that movie in my no. Don't do that. No one watched that movie. You're all going to Google this after and you're going to find out that I'm right. And this is going to be one of those instances where I tell you not to do something and then you go do it. And then you're going to come back and you're going to say, Carlin, you were right. You were right. I should have listened. Antichrist has nothing on Sallow. Okay. Antichrist is Sallow light. I would actually watch Antichrist again for movie night. I would not see. No, Sallow. No, don't do it. And if you Google it now and you watch it, it's your own damn fault. I tried to warn you and you didn't listen. All right, guys, before we get into the stream for tonight, this is Knitwits. And so I do need to show you what I'm knitting. Now I'm going to show you a picture of what I'm knitting. I'm still working on this West Knit shawl. I'm almost done it though. This is what the shawl looks like. You can picture it right side up when it's completed. I'm actually working on this part right now. I will show you it in a second. This is the very last part of the shawl. I still need to do some embellishment, but I'm changing it up a little bit. I'm going to be doing some monster-ass tassels on my shawl. So kind of like this, but not exactly like this. But this is what I'm going to be doing to finish mine. I'm not going to finish it like he has here with it being clean. I'm going to finish mine a little bit differently with those giant-ass tassels. And here is how it looks right now. Let me see. Let me see if I can get my mic. So I'm finishing that last part. You can see my knitting needles attached right now. And I still need to do this embellishment. I haven't done that yet. But I'm going to be finishing it off with some giant ass tassels. And guess what, guys? I might even get to the point where I'm making tassels on the stream today. And I have these fun little tassel makers. So I have, if I want a little tassel, I have a rabbit one. If I want a medium tassel, that's a little lamb tassel maker. I could do a sheep tassel, but for this shawl, I am doing the goat 4-inch tassel. I'm making some monster fucking tassels for this thing. I fucking love tassels. Tassels are the best. They're so fun to make. Maybe I'll get to it on the stream tonight. Maybe I won't. I wanted to show you my fun little tassel tool. Mark Robichaud, I had the DVD before they banned it. Dude, how many times have you watched that movie, Mark? I'm starting to question you. I have to say. So guys, that's what we're going to be doing today for Nitwits. Now why don't we jump in? Get this party started. Please mount that like button for me. We do not smash the like button on this channel. We mount the like button on the show. Gray, I told you not to Google it. I told you. You guys never listen to me. And then you always come crawling back and you're like, Carlin, you were right. We should have listened. All right, guys, let's jump into it. We are watching the John Doyle Hunter Avallone debate tonight. Please feel free to chat in throughout the debate. I will display all super chats on the screen. But if you chat in something exceptionally funny and or insightful, you could also be displayed on the screen just for a normal chat. And of course, there are always opportunities to become king or queen of the chat for tonight that you can take advantage of. Remember, I have rules in my chat. Rule number 1 is don't be a dick. Don't insult me. Don't insult other people in the chat. You can insult John Doyle and Hunter Avallone, though. I don't care about that. But don't be a dick to anyone that's here right now. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, no whining. If I ask you to stop doing something, stop doing it. You're just disrupting things for the rest of us. I want to create a nice environment in which we can all chill out. It's a holiday. I've had almost an entire bottle of champagne. I don't want any nonsense tonight, all right? So those are the rules. Don't be a dick, no whining. However, if you say something that's really funny or really insightful, I might make you king or queen of the chat for the night, which means you can say whatever the fuck you want and I won't ban you for it. So that's what you're all striving for. Let's get this party started.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is James Cowell. I'm the COO and the campus president of Uncensored America at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I want to thank you guys so much for coming out. And in addition, if you guys want to get involved with us, I wanted to make you guys aware. You can find anybody with a volunteer tag or myself or Sean over there in the corner.
Has it kicked in yet?
We can set you up with all the things you need. With that out of the way, I'll hand this over to Sean.
Thank you, Reagan. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, James. That was very nice. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad everybody came out. This is a great evening. If you don't know about us yet, we're a nonpartisan organization that's a free
probably
speech
true.
But where we differ from most free speech organizations is that we are trying to push back against cancel culture and censorship. And the most effective way to do that is to actually host people who are censored, canceled, or have dissenting opinions. So that's our main priority, but we'll host anybody, we'll talk to anybody, we'll have any debate with anyone at any time. So we're trying to bring back a free speech culture to America. I mean, we do have the First Amendment, which is great, but if you've ever tweeted anything provocative or if you've had a controversial opinion, you know what it's like out there to get canceled or censored. You don't really have free speech in the practical sense. You do have it legally, but not really in a practical sense. So that's what we're going to try and change. And we're fighting a good fight every day. We were just at Penn State 2 weeks ago. I don't know if anybody saw about that, but it got a little crazy. And just being here right now is a victory for free speech, which might sound ridiculous, but if you saw anything that happened at Penn State, you probably heard that Gavin McInnes was going to speak there. There were a bunch of news articles.
Oh, did you get it before they canceled it?
Plan,
they took that shirt down. They canceled that shirt on me.
Come out.
That was
then
a
event
good shirt.
day came, and Penn State canceled the event. Which, look, let's be real. The protesters wanted to shut it down. They won. And that's terrible. That's awful that they were able to pull that off, that they were able to censor and cancel 2 speakers on campus. And like I said, hundreds came out. If you saw Alex Stein's Twitter or his YouTube, there was a girl that spit on him.
That was amazing. Alex Stein was such a king.
All across the country. and he was on Tucker Carlson talking about it. So it was still a big deal, but unfortunately, there are people that will try to shut us down. There were a few protesters out there, but they didn't come anywhere close to this to try and shut us down. So thankfully, we're here. We're going to have a debate, and we're going to have a great time tonight. So with that said, I think the moral of the story really is that we got to keep fighting. There's a lot of challenging issues, a lot of challenging times ahead, and we just got to keep fighting through it. I mean, even when they try to cancel you, even when they do successfully succeed in canceling you or shutting you down or writing an SPLC hit piece on you, you have to keep fighting, because if you don't, they win. And that's why we're here today, because we're going to keep fighting. But if you want to start a chapter of Uncensored America at your campus, if anybody's out of town, which I'm sure quite a few people from here are, go to uncensoredamerica.us, and we have a link right on the homepage where you can start a chapter on your campus. It's very simple and easy. I will help you out with that, and some of my officers will as well. But if you want to get more involved, like James said, you can talk to him afterwards, or you can talk to me if you want to start a chapter, or just check out our cool merch that you probably saw on the screen there, or any of our stickers, or anything that you like. You can all check that out there and follow us on social media as well. So now on to the debate that you're all here for. Both of these guys are political YouTubers that you've probably watched at some point in your internet history, and you've had a great time enjoying them. But now I get to see them in person. We are going to be debating gender roles. Specifically, should America return to traditional gender roles? And in the affirmative, we will have the Christian conservative, who is the host of Heck Off Commie on YouTube. And in the negative, we will have a left-wing YouTuber who you may remember from a few years ago was actually a Republican hardcore conservative that is now a left-wing YouTuber. So, everybody please welcome
Because that's
John
where
Doyle,
the money
Hunter
is.
Avallone.
That's where the money is, honey. Where did the sound go? The sound is off on their end, not on mine. I'm sure it'll come back. Oh, there it goes. Okay, good. Hunter Avallone needs to get a fitted jacket.
Now, before we start, I just want to quick the debate rules for both you guys. We will be answering the question tonight, should America return to traditional gender roles? You'll each have a 10 minutes to give an open statement, but you guys agreed that he would do a 15 one and you would do a 5-minute closing statement at the end. So we will have 2 segments and a crossfire in between. The first segment, each debater will get 5 minutes each, and then another round 5 minutes each. And then we'll go to the crossfire. Then we'll have a second segment where we'll have 5 minutes each again, another 5 minutes each.
There are idiots. Oh, shit.
Is different.
Well,
good evening.
Oh, shit. I fucked that up. I fucked that up. I was going to say, there are idiots on the internet who honestly think I became a libertarian as a grift. And I'm like, yo, if I wanted to grift, I would have gone back to the left. Are you serious? Like, there is no money in being a libertarian. There is none at all. The only money really in being a conservative is when you're interested in parroting the talking points that they want you to have, because that's how you're going to make money on the right. But like, the real money in all of this is being on the left. I think everyone should know that. Like, you can make a lot of money by being a fake leftist, which is why so many people do it. All right.
At the end, so we will have 2 segments and a crossfire in between. The first segment, each debater will get 5 minutes each, and then another round 5 minutes each, and then we'll go to the crossfire. Then we'll have a second segment where
I tend
we'll
to
have 5
agree with
minutes
that,
each again,
Shannon.
another 5 minutes each
I agree.
to respond, and then we'll have 10 minutes of closing statements per debater. There'll be a 20-minute Q&A at the end. All questions are welcome, and anything's up
It's
for
important
grabs.
to have goals,
We will
meta
start a
step.
line right here.
It's critical.
And then that'll be everything. There are no prepared notes, but you can prepare your openings, and you do have notepads that you can write anything you want on. So, without further ado, John, let's kick things off.
We are testing the audio. Is that a yes? Very good. Well, good evening. I would like to thank everybody for coming out this evening, even those who came out in the protest to protest against Hunter and myself, the 2 cis white men. You know, these are the real revolutionaries, right? It gets a little bit cold out, and all of a sudden fighting the fascists isn't so appealing. But these are the people who would have held Stalingrad, right? No, but Hunter and I, we had a real sort of Venom and Sandman moment behind the stage. I was like, look, you want to kill the SJWs. I want to kill the SJWs. Together, they don't stand a chance. Interesting. Okay, look, it's uncensored America, right? If you don't have like a playful death threat here and there, is it really free speech? Probably not. But anyways, this is the most professionally organized event that I've ever done. And I know that Hunter said the same as well backstage. So thank you to Uncensored America for putting this on. Thank you, of course, to the security for putting this on. Can we get a round of applause for them for doing such a fantastic job? So the topic that we will be debating this evening is, of course, whether America should return to traditional
This was
gender
recent.
roles.
This was like a
I
week and a
believe
half,
that we
couple weeks ago.
absolutely should, and my opponent this evening
Very
disagrees.
recent.
And so for the sake of intelligent discussion, I would hope that we can avoid the sort of sophomore characterizations of these traditional gender roles as oppressive and evil, because they aren't. They're quite the opposite, actually. Contrary to the popular narratives, when America retained these roles, women were still working, they were involved in their communities, they enjoyed different hobbies and projects.
Who made the decision to retain the roles?
Ultimately, both men and women understood that their ultimate purpose was to raise boys to be good men, good husbands, and good fathers, and to raise girls to be good women, good wives, and good mothers. Those who tend to sympathize with the views expressed by my opponent tend to regard those roles as not only harmful, but as socially constructed. Therefore, I believe that the crux of this debate this evening will be a difference of worldview, nature versus nurture, genetics versus environment, what our role is here on Earth, etc. With traditional gender roles, gender stereotypes, I would simply recall the Supreme Court precedents on pornography. You know it when you see it. We're all familiar with these. The question is, where do they come from? Those who tend to sympathize with my opponent would believe that things like race, like nationality, childhood, madness, age, intelligence, beauty, that these things are all social constructs, gender roles included, that they only exist because for whatever reason we, typically white men, have decided that they should. This is, of course, not the case. Men and women are fundamentally different. Their behavior is different. Their temperament is different. And this is much more related to their biology than to their environment. Behavior is biological. Think about what gender role even means. Gender as a word.
I guess what confuses me about this whole debate is, why can't you just leave people alone to do what they want? Because, like, I mean, this is true of both sides. I think that the left tries to pressure women to put everything into their career at the expense of getting married, at the expense of having a family. I think that the right tends to try to convince women that they aren't worthy of really any respect and consideration unless they're barefoot and pregnant. I guess, why can't we just say, do what you want to do? If you want to have a career, go have a career. If you want to be a housewife, go be a housewife. There's no good or bad that is perfect for everyone. Just do what you want to do. If you want to be somewhere in between, that's cool too, man. I don't know why we have to go for like an all or nothing thing on this. And I don't know why that's ever not acknowledged in debates like this. Leave people alone and let them do what they want.
Containing the prefix gen, like Genesis, generation, generate, meaning coming to be, followed by der, like dermatology, taxidermy, referring to skin, referring to flesh. So gender literally means your biological role in coming together and creating new flesh, creating life. Therefore, any gender role that you might have, by definition, would be your role in cultivating stable families and stable children, and by extension, stable societies. Our biological drives and instincts, whether you look at it from an evolutionary perspective or from a religious perspective, are oriented towards reproduction. And because of that, these gender roles and gender stereotypes are completely syndicated all throughout the world and all throughout history. With so much difference between all of these cultures and all of these time periods, it really makes you wonder why the only thing that they have in common besides these gender roles is human biology. Any honest preschool teacher or any honest parent can testify to the average differences between boys and girls. And in English, the word...
okay, so Trippy Liquids is saying, John would say that because it devolves into societal degeneracy and opens us up to subversion by bad actors, so what? I don't want to live in John Doyle's America. I have no desire to live in John Doyle's 1950 idyllic America, because that was never real to begin with, guys. And so it evolves us into degeneracy. Degeneracy, as John Doyle defines it. Why does John Doyle get to define what other people do with their lives, or what other people care about, or what other people prioritize, or how other people spend their time, or what other people spend their time doing? Like, the problem with this sort of argument is that someone ultimately has to be the decider. I don't want to be the decider over any one of you. I want you all to make your own decisions and live whatever life you want to live that's going to make you happy. But in return, I don't want you being the decider over me either. Like, leave me alone. Let me do what I want to do. It's none of your goddamn business.
We have to describe those who insist that there are no innate differences between the sexes is childless. This is your average feminist, of course, as we know. But let's experiment. Suppose that you were a visitor to a previously unknown society. You discover another continent or something. You gave the members of that society a test requiring them to identify the gender of a random person from that society, described by a series of adjectives. One is described as sentimental, submissive, superstitious, affectionate, dreamy, sensitive, attractive, dependent, emotional, fearful, soft-hearted, and weak. The other is described as adventurous, dominant, forceful, independent, strong, aggressive, autocratic, daring, enterprising, robust, stern, active, courageous, progressive, meaning continuing, rude, severe, unemotional, and wise. What is the likelihood that the members of that society will identify the former gender as male and the latter as female? Well, a cross-cultural study of gender stereotypes conducted by John Williams and Deborah Best suggests that the answer is virtually zero. Respondents in at least 23 of the 25 countries studied associated each of the first set of adjectives, each individual one, not just all cumulatively, with females, and the second set with males. Moreover, since gender roles are inherently sexual in that is what unites man and woman, insight into the truth of these can be found through what each sex is attracted to in a mate. If these roles are socially conditioned, then it should make no difference, especially not throughout the world in cultures that don't have our level of Western enlightenment. But evolutionary psychologist David Buss studied mate preferences in 37 different cultures over 5 years, and he found that women's and men's ideal mates were stable and differed very little by culture. Whether women were from Iran or Vietnam or wherever else in the world, they valued material resource, social status, and ambition in men much more than physical appearance. And I bet you can guess what the men valued, which was them being young and physically attractive. Moreover, once the designers of the study knew what an anonymous person's preferences or ideals were in a mate, they could predict the sex of that person with 92% accuracy. Sounds to me like no matter where you are, women want confident providers and men want beautiful women. And we wonder why feminists are mad. So what is attractive in males and females is attractive because it implies how they will suit the role that we desire them for.
Doesn't even the idea of saying oh, men just want beautiful women, that's just the way it goes. Well, that's going to contribute to degeneracy as well, because guess what, guys? And this is coming from someone who's I've been married for 11 years. At some point, you're not going to look as pretty as you once did. You're not going to your body is going to get bigger than it once was. What happens to marriage, which John Doyle seems to value above all else? What happens to marriage when it's based on someone being hot, and then 10, 15 years into the marriage, someone isn't quite as hot as when you married them, and then, oh God, you get 20, 25 years into the marriage and you're looking at a completely different person that you may not even like the appearance of anymore. What happens when you prioritize looks above everything else? The marriage falls apart. And if you have kids by that point, then the kids are going to be traumatized by the divorce of the parents if it was predicated upon the wife being hot. People age. It is unavoidable. And I don't think John Doyle takes that into consideration with his argument, because and why would he? Because he's he's 23 or something. He's so young, and he hasn't quite realized yet that someday he will get old and he will age and he won't always look like this, and that's just the way it goes.
Desirable traits in males imply the role of the provider and the protector, and desirable traits in women imply the role of the mother. If our society is to have a future, then it will require men and women to get together and have children. And if there are roles and behaviors that we are biologically predisposed to pursue, then it is better to pursue them than to fight reality and just be miserable. So those like my opponent will have to explain why Western social constructs actually have a greater impact and syndication on the world, and can explain this better than simple biology, and why this has been the case for virtually all of human history.
That's because
Why has
Tom
there never
Cruise is
been
a
a matriarchal
Scientologist, and
society
that's
where all
demonic.
the men throughout the world just sending letters back and forth
Scientology
with
is
notes on how
injecting
to
Tom
oppress
Cruise with
women?
something to keep
No.
him young.
Male leadership is rooted in biology. But despite our universal awareness of these traits,
He's not
we're
my
told that they are
type, but I'm
stereotypes,
sure
which
some
is to
people
say
find him attractive.
It's bad to recognize patterns. Despite this, stereotype accuracy is actually one of the most replicable effects discovered in social psychology. Sure, stereotypes may be bad if we're all taught that people on like Mars are a certain way, which causes us to think inaccurately of them. But men and women interact with each other constantly for their entire lives. And the idea that the average person would ignore a lifetime of personal experience just to subconsciously uphold some sort of unfounded myth just simply defies belief. Most studies of stereotype accuracy have shown them to be accurate generalizations relying on probability rather than category, meaning acknowledging the existence of tendencies can coexist with acknowledging the existence of outliers. For example, there's an overwhelming empirical
It couldn't have been easy for John Doyle in school. Like I said, he is really legitimately smart. He is exceptional for someone his age. He really is. It couldn't have been easy for him in school. I bet he was picked on a lot. Has he ever talked about what it was like for him growing up? Does anyone know? I would honestly be curious to like talk to him about this, because I bet he was one of those kids that was like he was one of those kids that was like skipped ahead like 2 or 3 grades because he was so much smarter than the other kids he went to school with. I bet he got picked on a lot, and that probably explains a lot of why how John Doyle sees the world today, was that he was picked on in school for being smarter than everyone else. Anyone disagree with me?
evidence of sex differences in temperament. In a review of sex difference research, psychologist Alice Eagley found that existing research refutes 4 commonly asserted claims about sex differences: that they are small, inconsistent from study to study, artifactual, and inconsistent with stereotypes. Eagley notes that despite frequent repetition of such claims, it is not cultural stereotypes that have been shattered by contemporary psychological research, but rather the scientific consensus forged in the feminist movement in the 1970s. But maybe those differences do exist, but it's because of socialization and environmental conditioning. Okay, how can we test
Has
that?
he really said that?
Presumably by looking at children, right?
wouldn't
Since
surprise
the
me.
period during which they would have been socialized into believing these things would be the shortest. Well, from a young age, boys are far more competitive than girls. Even in preschool, they engage in more competitive activities than girls. Moreover, a study of 2nd through 12th graders revealed that girls reported stronger attitudes about cooperation and weaker attitudes about competition in all grades than did boys. Janet Lever's famous study of how children play reflects this as well. Young boys are far more likely to engage in games, meaning play where there is specific competitive goals, while girls are far more likely to engage in play, things without explicit goals or competition like hopscotch, jump rope, etc. And even that competition is actually indirect because it's through turn taking instead of, more explicit in the moment competition like boys engage in. And of course, domination and leadership are forms of competition as well. Dominance behaviors are those intended to achieve or maintain a position of high relative status, to obtain power, influence, resources, all the things that women want, etc. And studies have shown that when children get together, even in preschool years, dominance hierarchies emerge spontaneously. Some children are far more influential and less subject to aggression by others. Boys engage in a significantly greater amount of dominance play related than girls do, such as playing with weapons, engaging in rough and tumble play, and then also in mixed sex groups in nursery schools, boys end up disproportionately at the top of the classroom hierarchy. This is very important because little boys and little girls are basically equal at that age physically. So if male dominance throughout world history is only due to this later developed strength, you'd expect there to be a delay in these behaviors, but there aren't. It's instinctual. Even among mixed group of 33-year-old toddlers, girls are far more likely to listen to instructions from boys than vice versa. Male leadership is just natural. The historical record is perfectly clear. Men have generally achieved status through dominance of other men, and women have generally achieved status through their associations with high status men, sometimes even by competing with women for them. Not surprisingly, in same-sex pairings, a high dominance individual will assume a leadership position over a low dominance individual. However, when a high dominance woman is paired with a low dominance man, the man actually tends to assume the leadership role, but it's not because he asserted dominance over the woman, but rather because the woman selected him to be the leader. Conversely, females in all known societies exhibit more nurturing behavior than males, both inside and outside of the family. Everywhere, it is women who are the primary caretakers of the young, the sick, and the old. Psychological studies tend to confirm that women are more empathetic than men, regardless of age or the measures used, which which is of
I
course
wish they'd gone for the
substantially
shorter
correlated,
opening statement.
with
He needs to
nurturing
take a
behavior.
breath.
And females of all ages tend to be person-oriented, while males tend to be object-oriented. As early as their first year of life, even, girls pay more attention to people and boys pay more attention to inanimate objects. When shown identical photographs, males have a greater tendency to report seeing objects, while females do with seeing different people. Differences in orientation affect the way that people perceive themselves.
He's trying to
Women's
prove to us
self-identity
how
and
smart he is
self-esteem
here.
tend to be centered around sensitivity and their relationships.
This opening statement is all about John Doyle proving how smart he is. He's not trying to convince anyone, not really, because if John Doyle was actually trying to convince people with this opening statement, he would slow the fuck down. He would take a little bit more time with each point, because he is not like, what he's saying is going too fast and it's too detail oriented to even register into the heads of the people listening to this. So in the opening statement, Hunter Avallone might actually have like the upper hand, because Hunter Avallone's not going to do what John Doyle's doing. Now, what John Doyle's doing is saying, I'm going to throw he's basically being like high school debate club, right? I'm going to throw as many facts at you as I can, because the more facts I throw at you, the more right I am. And I'm going to prove to you how smart I am by speaking really fast and throwing as many facts at you as I can, because this is how I need to prove how smart I am, because I'm not validating myself. I'm looking for my audience for validation. I need validation from you. Please tell me how smart I am. 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 John Doyle is going to be a lot more effective in what he is trying to achieve when he stops trying to convince people how smart he is. I don't think it's going to happen for a little while yet, because, you know, he's still at the stage where his brain isn't even fully developed yet. But like John Doyle, if he figures this out in like, you know, like 5 years or so, maybe like by the time he's like 30-ish, this kid's going to be like he's going to be much more effective at at making the arguments that he is making in about 5 to 7 years, is my guess. But he's not there yet, because he's still looking for validation from the audience
to others, while a man's self-concept tends to be centered around task performance, independence, dominance, things of that nature. And one study showed that 50% of women, but only 15% of men agreed with the statement, when I can succeed at something that will also make other people happy. This provides insight into the differences between male and female depression. And females on average outperform males on language skills right out of the womb. They typically start speaking earlier and advance to whole sentences sooner than baby boys. Males do catch up, but much later, and throughout their school years, girls score higher on average than boys do in both reading and writing. Conversely, the ratio of boys who score over 700 out of 800 on the math section of their SAT is 13-1. Certainly, each culture may have their unique quirks and eccentricities for how males and females behave, but the fundamentals are obviously biological. PET and fMRI scans have allowed us to view how the male and female brains activate in certain areas when solving problems and responding to stimuli. Males have 2.5 times the brain space devoted to sex drive and larger areas devoted to aggression and action. The corpus callosum, which links the left side of the brain to the right side, is thicker in women, meaning it's better able to pass messages from one part to the other, which is shown to grant an advantage in things like verbal fluency. As much as progressives want to pretend that there are no differences between men and women, there's simply no respectable argument for that anymore. Science is settled, if you will. A number of medical studies have even shown that female-to-male organ transplants are more likely to fail than male-to-male organ transplants,
that's
even when
interesting.
controlling for body size. The bottom line, as articulated by Dr. Margaret McCarthy, is that sex is a biological variable that profoundly influences the physiology of every organ in the body. And of course, the brain is an organ. Sure, there's variance. Sure, women with higher levels of testosterone are more likely to be unfaithful spouses. They're more likely to have stronger handshakes. They're more or less likely to smile in photographs. There's always interesting little quirks. But any neurologist would be able to correctly identify those brains as females because the differences are that significant. Therefore, if my opponent is to win the debate, he will have to prove that gender roles in themselves do not exist
I've
at all
actually
beyond
said that
arbitrary
several
and perhaps
times. I've said
oppressive
he's
social
very smart.
constructs, and explain why that's been the case for virtually all of history. Gender roles, of course, only being relevant to the discussion because of failed predictions about, well, if we stop oppressing them, it'll be equal. And then, well, if we stop discriminating against them, it'll be equal. And now finally, the blame is on these internalized attitudes about gender and socially constructed things that can't be proven. Then that'll finally be equal. Why is it that the profile, though, of the most depressed person in America is also the profile of she who we're told is the greatest beneficiary of these programs, the single, middle-aged, childless working woman. Why do primates display early sex differences in behavior? Is this also socially constructed? Young male monkeys have been found to prefer dump trucks and other vehicles as opposed to plush dolls, whereas the young female monkeys prefer the plush dolls. Are they behaving differently because we expect them to? If so, why doesn't this translate to our expectations of them throwing feces at each other? With the academic censorship and cultural programming, you would expect the male-female gaps to close if it were really about environment, but they haven't. So the question is, should America return to traditional gender roles? It's not as simple as door A versus door B. It's actually about rather consciously choosing to continue to swim upstream away from our nature. And given that we know the answer to this is yes, the gender roles are biological, the more interesting question is, how has this messaging created a culture that is better for men and women than the one that we had prior? It's created broken homes, broken children, isolation, nihilism, and despondency. What have we gained in return for this grand social experiment, and why should it continue? If we had the option to return economically and socially,
Why should it continue? Why should it continue? Because people should be allowed to live their lives however they see fit. That's why it should continue. If women want to work, let them work. If they want to be mothers, let them be mothers. Listen, I think that it is a shame that women are pressured to go into corporate America and to not have kids if they want them. I think it's a shame that it is virtually impossible to live on one income at this point. And so, you know, if you're in a marriage, like the woman probably has to have a job because unless the woman really married wealthy, like it is going to be really hard to be a stay-at-home mom. I think those things are sad. I think that if a woman wants to be a stay-at-home mom and like barefoot and pregnant all of the time and to abdicate all formal leadership and allow her husband to be the head of the household, I certainly know trad wives, and some of them, and they're making a purposeful decision and that's what they want. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, there's also nothing wrong with someone wanting to have a job and not wanting to have kids. I'm sorry, like I'm not having kids. I don't want kids. I don't like kids. I find kids to be annoying. I know that might surprise people because of the stuff I do on the schools, but like I'm interested in the schools, not because I have a personal, well, I do have not because I have kids in the schools, but because I understand the problem with indoctrinating an entire generation of people and how that's going to have detrimental impact on all of us, on all of us. But I personally find kids annoying. Like not having a job and just being pregnant all the time, that would be my very definition of a nightmare. Now, I don't want to begrudge anyone else doing it. Like, do what you want to do, man. Whatever makes you happy, and we should be honest about what makes us happy. We shouldn't be pressured into doing something we don't want to do. But like, people should have the freedom to do what they want.
Pew Research shows that among married mothers, 76% of them say that their ideal work situation would be either no work or just part-time work. Include into that single mothers, that figure still remains at 67%. Moreover, Pew Research, when researching the trade-offs between work and family time, found that married mothers who had, quote, made sacrifices for their family
This
were the
opening
happiest.
statement is like
We've
18
also
years
learned that
long.
homemakers are more likely to report being very satisfied with the work they do in comparison to those who pursue paid employment. When women have the option, this is what they want. If Hunter is correct, you would expect to see happier men and happier women, but you see the opposite. You see widespread despair, mental illness, and suicide. Rejecting gender roles is a form of narcissism. It says, I am better than my biology. I'm living for me. And not coincidentally, research published in 2009 by psychologist Jen Twenge used data collected from some 16,000 college students and found a sharp rise in scores on a narcissism
Hey,
index
that bitch. Happy
personality
Thanksgiving.
test, of course, disproportionately affecting young women since the 1950s. But anytime egalitarianism is brought up, it's framed as both possible and desirable. There's literally no metric to suggest that these things have been good for us other than the fact that they've happened. Why is this good? Because we have it now. Why is it good to have equality? Because it's equal. Who cares? If history has been so terrible and patriarchal, then how did we build the society? And why have the last few decades of experimenting with my opponent's ideas about gender been so disastrous for men and women? Are we really supposed to believe that without these oppressive gender roles, we would have something like Wakanda? And if so, why have we declined so rapidly since the onset of these attitudes a few decades?
Hang on. I disagree with this, Shannon. I'm sorry. I need to work. I always have 15 projects going on for a reason. I need to work. Now, John Doyle's going to argue Carlin just has a higher level of testosterone than the average woman. And that might be true. I've always been more masculine in my demeanor. I have a lot of masculine energy. And so that might very well be true, but like I would go fucking insane if I didn't have a project, if I didn't have anything going on. That's just the way it goes. Multi-Drider, the real problem is feminists assume what is good for one is good for all, which is why some push for the opposite. But I think people should choose what's best. Yeah, I agree. I think that feminism, both second wave feminism and third wave feminism, are both problematic. Although at this point, I do tend to agree more with like the second wave feminists than like the third wave. But like feminists are kind of nuts in general. Although, like, you know, you have to admire the well, figurative balls of the TERFs. Like the TERFs, man, the TERFs are some badass bitches that have been doing a lot to push back on like radical gender ideology and all of that. And so it's a shame that like people like John Doyle will never see value in what the TERFs are doing because they're TERFs, right? They're feminists. And so he's going to say you're bad because you're a feminist. The TERFs have actually been some of the strongest fighters against the gender ideology stuff. So it's like this stupid gender role stuff shouldn't even be the thing that we're arguing about, I think. But we should be focused on other things would be my preference. Cyrus Cherry, in kind of shock, Hunter hasn't come out as they them, but happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, I mean, maybe Hunter will become a they them someday. Maybe so. We'll have to see. Happy Thanksgiving, Cyrus. Thank you for the support. All right, guys, please mount that like button if you are having a wonderful Thanksgiving or just if you feel like it. Let's continue.
Decades ago. When does the utopia kick in? A social construction is not by definition at odds with nature. It emerges from our nature and serves human needs. Boys must be guided into manhood much differently than girls who must be guided into womanhood. This is how we build society. The most happy people in America are married men and married women. Statistically, married couples are much healthier, wealthier, less prone to suicide, less prone to abuse drugs and alcohol, less likely to be employed, more likely to have a broad network of friends and relatives, all more than single and divorced people.
Oh, thank God.
This is a fact.
Thank God.
Attacking the institution of marriage through gender roles is terrorism, and we will not stand for it.
Oh my God.
Hunter?
I'm very much looking forward to Hunter's opening.
All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you very much to Uncensored America for censoring this, or for censoring this event, for sponsoring this event. No censorship here. One complaint, though, you guys did mess up with bringing me my soy milk, but it's okay. I can forgive you. But yeah, so today the question is, should America return to traditional gender roles?
Hang on. Do you think Hunter is wearing his father's jacket? I'm being serious. Hunter needs to get like a proper blazer. Is he wearing his father's jacket?
Gender roles are a collection of behaviors that we expect men and women to adhere to in order to be the ideal man or woman. Although gender roles have changed and adapted throughout history, some roles have outlived others. This includes women being polite, accommodating, nurturing, and men being aggressive, stoic, and dominant. These are considered more traditional gender roles. And just to be clear, gender roles by themselves are not always bad, but the enforcement of them almost always is.
What the hell?
Obviously, gender roles aren't enforced by law.
I
but they are
apologize. That was them,
enforced
not
socially.
me. That was them.
This includes stigma around men who show their emotions and stay at home with the kids, and shaming women who enter the workforce or prioritize career instead of starting a family.
What the hell?
Traditionalists will often claim that women are naturally more nurturing and men are naturally protective providers. This is almost always followed by fantasizing about 1950s America, the supposed golden era where the nuclear family was promoted, traditional gender roles were heavily encouraged, and women knew their place. It's true that the 1950s saw the highest rate of happiness among Americans yet. That is true.
Yes,
however,
James.
this wasn't due to
They
traditional
hired
gender
a
roles.
socialist.
In fact,
they
something
brought in
that
socialists to do the
don't
sound.
talk about very often is that although the nuclear
It's
family
true.
was heavily advertised, the 1950s actually saw traditional gender roles being challenged in many ways, particularly for women. After World War II, women made up a third of the workforce, entering the workforce at unprecedented rates during the war. Although traditional values were still heavily encouraged and women had fewer rights compared to men, many women challenged these roles and stayed content working jobs that were usually perceived as more masculine. Many traditionalists will also point to the 50s and 60s as an example of a time when marriage lasted and divorce was hardly an option. Again, it's true that the 50s saw an all-time high when it came to marriage rates, but you have to ask yourself, at what cost? Because this time also included less autonomy for women, divorce was rare, but spousal abuse was common, with domestic abuse not even being considered a legal matter, but a family issue. That's right, domestic abuse was not a legal matter. Law enforcement didn't even get involved most of the time, and domestic abuse wasn't formally criminalized nationally until 1994.
This is not a good argument,
Now,
Hunter.
thankfully, we've come a long way.
That's
and
not a
gender
good
roles have certainly
argument.
become looser, but these traditional gender roles are still encouraged in many ways, particularly when it comes to the modern nuclear family. Women are still generally seen as the caretakers, and men are usually expected to be the breadwinner. This arrangement works well for millions of couples in America. I have no problem with a stay-at-home mom and a working father. The problem arises again when these roles are enforced by shaming those who deviate from these gender expectations. The father absolutely should provide for his family, but what is provision? Provision is not limited to financial provision. If a father
Much
is
better,
better
Hunter.
equipped to stay
Much
at home
better
with the
argument.
kids, and the mother is better suited to be the breadwinner, why is this a problem? They should both be providing. Even if this kind of arrangement works better for some family units, stay-at-home dads still face shaming and stigma surrounding their masculinity. A 2013
Not a good argument.
Pew Research Center survey found that
Bad
while
argument. Bad, Hunter.
51% of Americans
Bad.
think a child is better off with a mother at home than in the workplace, only 8% say the child would be better off with a stay-at-home father. Furthermore, even if women are naturally better caretakers, the attempt at enforcing this role only results in negative outcomes. Research has actually shown that female caregivers experience greater role strain, which means that they face more pressure to conform to caregiving positions. An analysis by Bowling Green State University found that female caregivers generally report having more negative experiences than male caregivers. And according to a 2012 Gallup poll of more than 60,000 stay-at-home moms, they found these women were more likely to report anger, sadness, and depression compared to their employed counterparts. Now, of course, if being a stay-at-home mom is what the woman wants, I would
No,
expect her
Sharon,
to be
I
happy
completely
in that
agree.
role.
Hunter's
But
hair is not
enforcing it
good.
via
I
expectations
don't know
and stigma
who combed
pushes
his
people
hair,
into
but like
boxes that
it's
they
not
might
well
not
done.
fit in. Even more so, the attempt to enforce traditional gender roles actually harms a huge goal of traditionalists, which is strong and healthy family units. In 2013, the University of Chicago published a paper that looked at 4,000 married couples in America, and it found that once a woman started to earn more than her husband, divorce rates increased. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, doesn't this prove then that men should be the primary earners? No, actually. It proves that these rigid gender roles largely need to be done away with. The reason a female breadwinner increases the likelihood of divorce is largely because men feel emasculated for not living up to these arbitrary expectations placed on men. The study
I think that so I've had many conversations with my husband recently about all the bullshit that I have to go through on the internet, and my husband wants so badly to protect me from this. He wants so bad, like he feels like he doesn't know what to do. He wants to jump into it sometimes. He wants to, tell people off. If he was in a room with no windows with some of the people that have been coming after me on the internet for years, I don't want to know what my husband would do if there were no consequences. Um but I say all that because I think that men want to protect women. I think it's a natural instinct of them to want to protect and provide for women. And I think there are ways that women can, you know, allow the man to take care of them, allow the man to protect them, allow the man to, feel like he is important in their lives. And I sometimes don't think that women who I know I can do for myself. I know that I can build businesses. I know that I can earn money. I know like that none of that stuff is a problem for me. I think what I had to learn how to do in terms of my marriage is I had to learn to let my husband take care of things sometimes. I had to like there had to be ways for him to like take care of me because that's what he wants, and I do think that that's a very natural thing. He wants to take care of me, he wants to protect me, he wants to insulate me from people who would attack me and things like that. And I think that women sometimes should be more mindful of allowing their husband or their partner to do those things because, like, there's nothing wrong with it. And you know what? It's kind of nice. It's nice to have a man that like wants to take care of you and protect you, and there's nothing wrong with appreciating him for that.
But he also found that even when the woman earns more, she still does more housework as well. The authors of the study said that a threatening wife will take on a greater share of housework, so to comfort the husband's unease with the situation. If the woman is successful and is able to learn or able to earn more, this shouldn't cause unease. The end goal should be a happy, healthy, stable family unit. Even more so, according to a study published in Sage Journals, using data for married and cohabitating heterosexual couples in 29 countries from 2004 to 2014, their results provide robust evidence that male breadwinner norms are a key driver of the association between men's unemployment and risk of separation. An increase of 1 standard deviation in male breadwinner norms increases the odds of separation with men's unemployment by 32%. Unfortunately, when we shame men for not being the breadwinner, it destabilizes marriages and hurts the end goal of traditionalism. Because men feel pressure that they must be the breadwinner in order to be the ideal man, job loss can lead to lower confidence and a higher likelihood that the marriage will end. Attempting to enforce gender roles hurts marriages in other ways as well. Studies have already suggested that strict adherence to these rigid traditional gender roles. You're messing me up, Sean. Studies have already suggested that strict adherence to these rigid traditional gender roles can increase the likelihood that the man will act out in violence against his partner. But that's not all. A 2014 study assessed the effect of masculine discrepancy stress, which is a form of distress arising from perceived failure to conform to socially prescribed masculine gender role norms on intimate partner violence. Results indicated that masculine discrepancy stress significantly predicted men's historical perpetuation of intimate partner violence. Abuse of any kind is one of the leading causes of divorce. The more you shame men for failing to live up to your preferred gender roles, the more likely it is that that man will harm his marriage and harm his partner and destroy his marriage. And none of that is very traditional. Gendered expectations that men should be stoic, viewing emotions as a sign of weakness, is incredibly detrimental to men's own mental
I
well-being.
agree.
There have been
I
many
agree.
times
That is a
throughout-
great point, Hunter. Hunter is winning the debate so far for me, not because I agree with everything he says, because I actually really think that he's made some horrifically bad arguments. And yes, I agree. Hunter's hair is driving me insane. But I absolutely agree with this point that like viewing men as like these stoic people who like don't have emotions and like it's not masculine to show your emotions, that is just wrong, man. Men are allowed to have emotions too. And well-adjusted men. Oh, hey, Uncensored America. Like I just want to say, Uncensored America, thank you for dropping by, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing. This is like so far this is really good, and I'm gonna look into you guys a little bit more. And I appreciate what I've heard so far. So I am enjoying it so far. But I will say, like I think that Hunter is actually making a really good point about like men should be allowed to have emotions too. There's nothing wrong with that. And if men are suppressing emotions because they don't feel like they're allowed to have emotions, then I think that that's not going to work out well for the relationship. Anytime you're suppressing emotions, they're going to come out at some point. And they might not come out in the best, most productive way if you just don't like allow them the freedom to have those feelings, they're human too. Men are human beings too.
History when crying was specifically perceived as masculine. But that's far from the case nowadays. Unfortunately, this expectation leads to repressive coping styles and an increased likelihood of suicide. Now, I'm not sure how you could live a traditional life or raise a traditional family if you're dead. Today in the US, men are significantly more likely to die by suicide than women. Perhaps by acknowledging how enforcing these roles on men negatively affects them, society can help to alleviate this devastating reality. If gender roles work in your own relationship, that's cool. But don't try and force these roles on others to appease your own desire for a traditional aesthetic. Marriage has been proven to lead to higher rates of happiness and a longer lifespan. If you value marriage, recognize how these gender roles can impact the family unit, and it's crucial for a happier future. In fact, according to research published by Brigham Young University, couples with an equal partnership report more stability in their marriage, less conflict, less dependency, and less resentment.
I agree with that.
The expectation that men should be the breadwinner and women is naturally better off with the children can also have negative effects even on the children. How often have we heard people complain about how men rarely receive custody of the children? Maybe this is because we consistently reinforce this idea
That is a
women
great
are just
point.
always naturally.
This is the point that Hunter should have led with. To be honest, if you want to talk about traditional gender roles, it is completely unfair that women almost always end up with custody of the children. That is completely unfair. And in a lot of instances, it's not even what's best for the child. This is the point that Hunter should have led with. You got to, like, when you're debating a conservative, you have to out conservative them. You have to like everyone expected Hunter to approach this from like a leftist standpoint. Hunter should have like went around back of John Doyle and said, "Motherfucker, you want to engage in traditional gender roles? Tradition." Okay, probably he shouldn't have sworn if we want to keep it civil, but you know what I mean. Like he's in a civilized debate here. I'm not in a civilized debate. I'm on YouTube, but like he should have said, "John, if you want to adhere to traditional gender roles, that's going to lead to men not getting custody of the kids." This is his best argument yet.
Better caretakers. Again, the idea that you should be strong, caring, and provide for your family are good values to have, but they don't apply to men or women. These values should be universal, divorced from gender entirely, and decided upon based on whomever is better equipped for that role within the marriage. So to summarize, enforcing gender roles can have devastating effects on marriages. It can contribute to higher rates of violence against women. It forces people to conform at the expense of their own well-being. It ignores the potentially caring fathers who deserve custody over their children, and it contributes to higher rates of suicide.
Time's up.
None of that is
Oh,
traditional.
that went by so much faster, didn't it,
All right.
than John Doyle's
We're going to move on
opening?
to our first segment. We have our first segment where we'll be rotating from John, Hunter. Each will have 5 minutes. And then we'll do another round. We each have 5 minutes before we do the crossfire. So, John, you have 5 minutes.
Well, the first thing I'd like to address is sort of the overarching theme of his opening statement there, which is this idea that gender roles may exist in whatever capacity. They evolve over time, but they definitely shouldn't be enforced. I agree with this. No one's saying that gender roles should be enforced, but what's interesting is that while they may evolve over time, certain men in certain societies might dress a certain way, other men might cry before a knighting ceremony or something like that. Ultimately, the biological
knighting
roots of how
ceremony?
men and women behave are one-to-one all throughout history and all throughout different societies. Moreover, who is enforcing them? Where is like the gender role Stasi going door to door and being like, are you barefoot, naked, pregnant in the kitchen or whatever? This is just simply not happening. In fact, it's actually being enforced in the opposite direction through, frankly, institutional soft power. I mean, look at where you see in the media. The messaging is always anti-traditional. It's always why women who, well, frankly, white women. Why white women need to stop having kids? Why white people
Yeah,
need
but John, if it really was a biological imperative, and I don't actually necessarily disagree with John Doyle's point on this, but like, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. If it really was a biological imperative that women want to be caretakers and men want to be providers, literally no amount of media indoctrination could do anything else. A biological imperative is a biological imperative, man. You can hear whatever you want on CNN or on like a reality TV show that you might be watching. But if it's a biological imperative, then it's going to play out that way because people are going to have subconscious urges, and those subconscious urges are much stronger than our rational brain. It's going to be trying to force people into that direction no matter what, like kicking and screaming. This is not John Doyle's best argument.
To stop having kids right now. It is all anti-natalist propaganda. He did also make an interesting point there that I think is true, which is that it is more difficult now to get married.
this isn't necessarily because tradition in itself has failed, but because of things like economic structures, offshoring a manufacturing base. It is true that what we had in the 1950s is not what we have now, and that is a problem. So this is sort of an abstract discussion in that regard. Another thing that he mentioned there was less autonomy for women. I would be curious to see how that's defined. What does that even mean? Like, yeah, if you are legally enshrined via some document that you are married to this man, sure, there's going to be a little bit of limitations on that behavior, but I would be curious to see why that's inherently bad.
It's not really
Also,
limitations on
domestic
your
abuse.
behavior.
Careful.
That's not
Who
even
defines
true.
that?
That's
I
not
mean,
even true. Just because you're married does not mean there's actually limitations on your behavior. That's not true at all. Everyone has the freedom to define their marriage in the way that they want to define it, in the way that the two people in the marriage think is going to work best for them. So there's no inherent limitations that come with being married. Marriage is what you make of it. And in fact, trying to force people into a traditional marriage structure where every single person who's married in the history of couples has to follow the exact same rules, that is going to be more detrimental to marriage at the end of the day than just leaving people alone to do what they want to do.
and there is often a lot of embellishing that goes on in these cases. Obviously, no one here is for domestic abuse, but I would be curious to see what that was actually looking like back then, because you can
No,
look at
this
it from
isn't true. Bot, hang on. Bot says in the chat, you don't get to live alone. That's not true. There are married couples who live apart. There are married couples in which, like, one person is just basically traveling all of the time and they don't see each other that much. There are married couples that have multiple houses. Like, it's not the norm, and it's not certainly what I would choose. I like living with my husband. I also like traveling and being away from my husband. I travel, well, I actually don't travel that much anymore, but like back in the day, I used to travel by myself like all the time. And I loved it. And I loved coming home to my husband when I was ready to come home. Like, you can craft your marriage in whatever way you want, you know? Yeah, like sometimes married couples like take separate vacations. I'm telling you, like there have been times like when I have been away from my husband for like weeks at a time. I'm not saying we don't talk, we do talk, but like, you know, absence makes the heart grow fonder in some respects. I'm going to marry a rich man overseas. Go get it, bot. Yeah, Mark Robichaud says there are married couples that sleep with other people in the same house. That's true. There are married couples that are polyamorous. There are married couples that swing. There are married couples that have open relationships. Like there are married, like you, like marriage is what you make of it, and you have to decide with your partner what's best for you and what you both want. And it's like anyone forcing their expectations onto anyone else, that's a much bigger problem than someone existing in a marriage that's like maybe not traditional. There are group marriages. That's right. Again, I'm not saying that's what I would want. Many of you probably don't want that either, but for some people, that's what they want. That's what freedom is, man.
what was legally allowed and what was legally not allowed. But in terms of the actual instances of it occurring, you often hear this leftist trope of like, oh, women in the 50s were getting abused. And it's like, oh,
Who the
okay.
fuck are
Hey,
you?
grandma, is that true? Oh, no, sweetie, that's not. It's just like all this manufactured historical revisionism. Also, the decline in marriage through the 50s, it is true that the 50s were kind of the peak, but the decline began much further than that, right? I mean, through things like no-fault divorce, normalization of the sexual revolution, things like that. That's why marriage has declined, and it is good, and it does make people happier. And actually, you can look at studies that have surveyed 1,500 couples, or another one that's surveyed 40,000 people, and they find that couples in more traditional marriages, read less egalitarian marriages, are actually happier and stay together longer. In terms of women earning more leading to divorce, well, if you look at who's initiating the divorce, it's like 80% women. So I don't think it's exactly the man just being emasculated. I think it's more of what maybe the more incel types in the crowd would recognize as hypergamy. Women, regardless of their income, want men who earn more than they do. All across the world, all throughout time, they are attracted to resource and status. I mean, this is just the way that these things go. In terms of why do they still do housework, it's not because they're trying to coddle their stupid husband. It's if you look at the way that men and women solve problems, men solve problems problems by looking at it and reducing it to its most componental forms and kind of solving it from there. Women tend to be much more meticulous. For those of us married, you might recall a situation where you were assigned
Sean
to do a
Doyle
chore
married?
and you did it because you're not like this character of like, no, I'm the man. You did it. And your wife comes by and she's like, no, let me do it. You didn't do it right. That's just the way that these things go. So yeah, they're still doing the housework, but I don't think it's because they're like trying to help out their like poor husband. I'd be curious to see the sort of psychoanalysis on this too. Is Hunter a stay-at-home dad? Is he insecure in that role? Who knows? But maybe you just feel like you failed as a man. Well, maybe that is what it is. You failed as a man. There's something going on within you that feels like you failed to provide. Maybe that's not socially constructed. Maybe that's just a reality. Like, it's not like this situation where, oh, I feel like I should be LARPing the 1950s, but I can't afford a Bel Air. What? I'm just distraught. Maybe it's like the most fundamental components of who you are as a man is actually being challenged by your inability to provide. I think that's very important to consider. Also, why is it bad? Why is it bad that, men might be earning more, women might be earning less? I fail to see how that's bad. And of course, he did neglect to address all of the biological components that I was certain to mention in my introduction. Very important stuff. He also brought up the suicide rates, male suicide, because of these harmful
Yes,
gender
I
stereotypes.
am pretty sure that
When they
John
were-
Doyle is a virgin as well. And this is going to be a big problem for John if he doesn't and the reason I say that is repressed sexual energy has to be channeled somewhere. Maybe right now John Doyle is channeling his repressed sexual energy because we also know that John Doyle doesn't watch porn or claims not to watch porn. That's all got to get channeled into something. Maybe he's channeling it right now into this debating stuff. Maybe that's why he's speaking so fast and is it I'm about to say something really awful, but it just popped into my mind. John Doyle's debate style. And again, I think John Doyle is very smart. I am not knocking his intelligence. But John Doyle's debate style is like a young guy that's never had sex, that is really, really, really over eager about having sex and maybe gets it over a little too quickly because he's so over eager about having sex. That's what John Doyle's fucking debate style is. It's like, look at me, look at me, look at me, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Oh, it's over. That's what John Doyle's debating style is. He needs to get laid. Hunter, at least we know, is having sex. Maybe that's why he's a little bit more chill. Even though I don't think Hunter is as smart as John Doyle, I think Hunter has actually made a better argument at this point than John Doyle has.
Were at their peak in the 1950s, let's say. What are you, some kind of fairy? Kids weren't killing themselves at the rate they are now. Men weren't killing themselves at the rate they are now. So when gender roles were the most strict, the suicide rates and the depression rates in both genders were not what they are now. So I fail to see how that computes. Equal partnership is another thing he brought up. I would be curious to see how they define that. A lot of married couples I know who are more traditional consider themselves equal in the sense that the man provides, the woman takes care of the other things. And with the divorce court thing, I think it's also fair
Hunter
to say,
wasn't as boring
they tend
as
to frame
John.
men
That's
as
very true.
abusers more than they frame women as nurturers. You're not going to have some liberal judge who's like, oh, the women are just so good at nurturing. It's going to be like, men are evil. So yes.
Some of this is from John, your opening here. So you seem to be really set on this biological difference here. And I don't know if maybe some other blue-haired lefties have a weirder position, but obviously biology is real. Yes, of course. And you even talk about how men and women have brain differences. And even some of that is true. However, I think you left out something very important, which is that brains are malleable. They are like plastic. You can talk to scientists about this. And so social norms, essentially.
Hang on, Emo Dante has a super chat. Does access to or lack of sex affect a person's demeanor? I mean, I think it does. But so if you're not the deal with sex is if you are an adult and you're not having sex, that energy has to get channeled into something else. It could be channeled into your career. It could be channeled into art. It could be channeled into, I don't know, a hobby. But if you're not having sex, that sex is part of our core of the core of who we are. Sex is literally how we create. It's how we're all created. And so if you're not having sex, It is a biological imperative that you are going to have to compensate for that not having sex somewhere. So it's not necessarily that a lack of sex is going to impact a person's demeanor. If a person is not having sex, but they're channeling that energy through other means, again, through debate, through art, through their career, through dancing, through what have you, then it's probably going to be okay, because it's kind of like that same listen, the ultimate act of creativity, of creation, is a man and a woman coming together and literally creating a child. Sex is the ultimate act of creation. But there are many ways that human beings can create things. They can build businesses, they can create art and music and dance. They can create plays, they can write books. Like, there are other ways that you can channel creative energy that are not just through sex. But if you're not actively channeling your creative energy into a creative act, then you are going to repress a lot of stuff that's going to make you a miserable, miserable person that is going to be absolutely insufferable to be around. So it really just depends. When you think of like everything is just energy, right? So if you think of sex, think creativity. And then think about different things you can create. If you think of like something like money, think of value. What can you create in the world that's valuable, that people will want to give you money for because it's just in a value exchange? Everything is just energy. And so if you can get to the core of what those acts are intended to do, then you're going to be able to better channel the energy. But if you're not doing that and you're pretending, John Doyle, that you can be a virgin your entire life, then it's probably not going to work out well for you. It is a biological imperative.
Have the potential to change how your brain operates.
Yeah, a lot of
So that
asexual
could
people.
also play.
This is a really great point from Hellbound here. A lot of asexual people are artists, because art, the same thing that allows you to create beautiful art, whether that be painting or photography or drawing or whatnot, etc., etc. The same energy that allows you to create that art is the same energy that, will lead you to having really great sex. It's the same thing. And so if you're asexual, fine, nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with not having sex, but you got to find a way to channel that energy. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. And I bet you make some great art, Hellbound.
Role in why you see differences in male and female brains. But again, biology is real. I'm not denying that. Again, the problem comes when you are trying to enforce these gender roles on other people. And I don't know
Great
why you
point,
would say you are
Brooklyn
not
Way.
trying to enforce them when you are literally advocating to bring America back to traditional gender roles. I don't know how you do that unless you're planning on enforcing it to a degree. And then you even go
Good point,
further and
Hunter.
say, well, who's enforcing them? And then you proceed to try and get a diss at me for possibly being a stay-at-home dad. John, you're the one doing it, buddy. You're the one going door to door, making sure that the women are pregnant and naked.
God damn it. Hunter Avallone is winning this debate for me. And it really pisses me off that Hunter Avallone is winning this debate. I don't like Hunter Avallone as a person. I don't. I think he is a snake. I think he's whiny. I think he has no principles. I think he will do and say whatever he needs to do to get paid. And it pisses me off that Hunter Avallone is winning this debate. John, you have to step up. You are smarter than Hunter, John.
In the kitchen. And you talk about no-fault divorce. That's another one I hear a lot about. I think people fail to understand that no-fault divorce largely means that you don't need to prove to a divorce court why you are getting a divorce, which, let's be real, how does somebody prove that they're being emotionally abused? How does somebody prove that? That cannot always be proven in a court. So no-fault divorce, it goes both ways. I don't know really what relevance that has. You bring up the study about how women seem to be happier, or they report happier marriages when they have more traditional gender roles. Now, the study you're talking about actually classified that as benevolent sexism. And what that means is that the man tend to treat the women as he would adore her. and he would be more protective of her. Again, nothing really wrong with that. I don't even know why they would call it benevolent sexism, to be honest. However, if you look at the actual study, you'll see the reason that they were happier, the reason men and women were happier.
Oh
at least,
man,
were
Sid, I'm
different.
jealous. I
Women
got pie
specifically were
downstairs.
happier
I have apple
because
though.
since the man was
Because Victor
giving
likes
her more
apple, so I got him an
adoration
apple
and
pie.
acting more protective, she actually
I
perceived the
wanted
marriage
pumpkin,
as
but I
being more
conceded.
egalitarian, and that was the reason why she was happier. You can read the study. I would dare any of you to do that. Now, let's see. What else do we have here? You talk about how things have gotten worse now. You bring up broken homes. Again, I've already explained how enforcing traditional gender roles can actually contribute to broken homes. So I don't know why you would want to keep doing that if you care about broken homes. You talk about widespread despair. That is true. People are becoming less happy. Again, you can't just point to people being unhappy and then just attribute it to any issue you want. The reason why people are less happy nowadays
Because I
is
don't need
because
2 pies in my
economic
house, Emily.
differences, and more
I
specifically,
really did
people
think
have
about
less
buying 2
friends.
though.
People
I
are
did.
not friends with their neighbors the
I
same
decided
way
it
that
was
they used to be.
overkill.
And as funny as that might sound, that is a large reason as to why the happiness rates are decreasing here in America. You also talk about the increase of narcissism. Again, you can look and see why. It's largely because of social media use. That brings out
No,
narcissism and
wrong,
has even been shown to have a
wrong,
correlation with narcissistic behavior.
wrong.
So to just
Narcissism is part genetic and it part has to do with your childhood. That's where narcissism comes from. Now, can narcissistic tendencies be expressed via social media? Yes, of course they can. Social media is going to be like a hotbed of narcissism, but narcissism is developed partly because of your genetics and partly because of your upbringing. And if both those things aren't there, you are not going to be a narcissist, and that's just the way it goes.
point to a time where people are unhappy and then attribute it to anything, I mean, that's not fair. I could say, well, a lot of people right now are unhappy, and John, you have a lot of subscribers, so clearly you're the reason why everybody's unhappy, you know? Like, that's, everybody I think can recognize that that's not a very reasonable or logical way to assess these issues. And then
God
last but
damn
not
it.
least, you talk about gender roles being a social construct. Again, biology can exist. Gender roles, as far as the expectations that we expect from certain people, those can be and largely are socially constructed. There's a reason why biology, or excuse me, gender roles have changed. And Doyle, you point to a lot of similarities between history and how there were some similarities there. But I feel like you've also left out some major differences. For example, this is a pretty funny one, but small penises used to be a sign of masculinity. There's a
No.
reason why these ancient statues all depict.
Did Hunter just reveal something about himself to us? I'm serious. Why on earth would Hunter Avallone choose small penises used to be considered masculine as a debate point? Why would that even pop into someone's head as a debate point in this context? Why do I now feel like I know way more about Hunter Avallone than I wanted to know about Hunter Avallone? God. I'm going to be traumatized for the entire rest of this debate. Is anyone feeling... Wait, he said this before? Has he actually admitted to having a small dick? Oh my God. Why would you say that on the internet? Any woman that tells you that size does not matter is either married to or dating someone with a small dick. It does matter. Why would you admit that? I'm not saying there aren't things that men can do to compensate. There are. But my God, why?
Men with, did my mic die? Okay. Depict men with these tiny little penises. And it's because at the time, having a large penis was seen as barbaric and ridiculous.
No.
And the
Hunter, I guarantee you that having a large penis has never been seen as barbaric in by women in the entire history of women. And I don't care what they said. Again, if a woman is saying that a large penis is barbaric, it is because they are married to someone with a small penis and they're trying to make him feel better about it. There has never been a time in the history of the world in which women have valued small penises over large ones when given the choice. It is just the way it goes. I am sorry for your shortcomings, dude. I really, really am. I am sure that you have learned to compensate in many other ways. For instance, men with small penises tend to be great at oral sex. It's just the way it goes. They don't have what is, you know, what is preferable in one area, so they compensate in the other. There's nothing wrong with that, Hunter. But to argue for one red second that women at any point in history saw large penises as barbaric is just incorrect. It is incorrect. And I don't care. I don't care what the ancient Greeks said. Again, there is a difference between what women say when their small penised husbands are listening to them and what they actually believe. There is not a universe that exists in which any woman would choose to have a small penis over a large penis if all other things were equal. There is no universe in which that exists.
Antithesis of masculinity. So I think that it's really important to dig into the nitty gritty there, the nuance. I didn't get to hit on everything, but I feel like I was able to address some of the main points you made there.
John, you have 5 minutes to respond. No problem.
Hold on, I never learned how to write correctly. So he acknowledged correctly that biology is real. Neuroplasticity is also something that is real. If you're familiar with the dissertation, you know that the effects of this are real. The thing is, though, neuroplasticity, socialization, whatever you'd like to call it, you can best isolate with babies and with young children, like we did so conveniently in my introduction. And if that were the case, that neuroplasticity, you know,
It's true, John.
molded,
It's
you
true.
expect to see like maybe 50-50. 40-60 in terms of like where the babies are landing on the gender role spectrum. It's 1-to-1. It's 100% of the time. Also, in terms of how enforcing it, are we really supposed to believe that Hunter Avallone gives a damn what I think about anything? That me making a little quip about a stay-at-home dad is somehow making stay-at-home dads insecure in the role? Absolutely not. But in terms of how it's being enforced, it's not so much enforcing it, it's simply removing the barriers. It is simply removing the propaganda that is telling young men and young women that the best thing they can do is pursue a career and not get married, and hookup culture and women wanting children is like outdated and cringe, and it's actually empowering to be a sentient fleshlight. That type of influence does get in people's brains. And so you can actually poll young people, and what you'll find is that many of them
Yes,
still report
I agree with
wanting to
this,
get married
Shannon.
and
He
wanting
needs to
have
move
kids,
on.
believing that, you
needs
know,
to move
males
on.
and females are completely equal in the sense that they are the same. But then they'll also say, well, you know, of course I'm a feminist. Of course I believe these things. So they are much less likely to want to say things that are socially unacceptable, but they still believe in their brains that they want to pursue things that would be regarded as more traditional. Also, benevolent sexism, call it what you want. Like, yeah, that sounds like pretty good to me. I don't know. It's like, oh, well, you're saying that the males and the females in the relationship were happy. Well, they were happy for different reasons because they're men and women. Yes, obviously. And also like, well, the woman actually, she's getting one up on you because she perceives it differently. She thinks it's actually equal. Who cares? Let her think what she wants. You know, like, okay, do your thing. That's fine. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have an effect on the relationship. Everybody's happy. Everything's fine. He is correct about the less friends, the relationships in general being in decline. It is true. This is symptomatic of industrial society, of technology, of things like that. And of course, these are problems and they have caused, you know, relationships to degrade. I am simply trying to remove the influence of the people who are purposefully trying from the top down to psyop young men and women into pursuing a life of hedonism as opposed to a life that is more meaningful through the creation of a family. In terms of suicide, depression, things like that, as mentioned in my intro, Males and females experience depression much differently. Men are more likely to feel depressed if they feel like they have failed in their role. Females are more likely to feel depressed if they sort of are off-put by the environment. You can also see this in their suicide rates, for example. Men are more likely to successfully commit suicide. Women are more likely to successfully attempt suicide. I'm sure we can see the picture. A male is in a position and he's like, yeah, there's no way out of this. Shotgun to the head. A woman might be having an emotional episode and just kind of does something and goes to the hospital. Everything's fine. I'm sorry, but this is just the case. So in terms of like what we expect from our partners being socially constructed, it's the same throughout cultures. Every single culture wanted the status, wanted the youth, wanted the beautiful young woman. That is the same. In terms of the little differences, oh, you know, this guy wanted it. It's like, okay, find me a big difference. Find me a culture that was like, actually, women are running the show. Actually, women are exclusively the providers, exclusively not the nurturers. There's literally not one society that does this. Also, the small penis thing, look, we've all been in high school. We've all doodled or whatever. Men just, you know, that's what we do. We plant the flag. And I think that it's probably more likely that the artists who were sculpting those sculptures knew that if they made a more accurate depiction of the male appendage, that would be all that people looked at. So I think it's actually historically accurate to say that the reason they did that was to to remove the distraction from the appendage and focus more on the beauty of the rest of the statue. And also, I would urge you, my new friend, I don't think that arguing that having a small penis is actually very masculine is going to give you the look that you would like it to.
Yeah, I agree. John Doyle is correct. Point for John Doyle. I agree.
You have 5 minutes, Hunter.
Is this working? Okay. First of all, I was arguing the small penis thing on your behalf, actually. So, you know, but no, all kidding aside, you're just wrong about the small penis thing. Okay, we should focus on that a little bit more. But no, but seriously, first of all, I'm not arguing that having a small penis nowadays is masculine.
Hunter,
I'm arguing,
stop.
Come on, we're all adults here, guys. Let's go.
Right
I'm arguing that at one point that was considered masculine.
Go.
And no, it wasn't just because they were worried that people wouldn't pay attention to the other sculpture. You can read about this from historians. Ancient Greece specifically sculpted men with small penises because that was considered the highest degree of what they would consider then male beauty. You ask for an example of when women ran the show. Again, I think that you're a little confused here. Biology is real. For a long, long time, men have ran the show, and that is largely because they have testosterone. They are stronger, yes. When we were back in the cavemen days, or the days in which you needed to be out doing physical labor consistently, then yes, men were obviously going to do better there. They have testosterone. Again, I am not denying that there are biological differences between males and females. What I'm saying is that just because at one point men were the providers due to testosterone does not mean that nowadays, since testosterone is not nearly as important for providing, considering a lot of labor jobs have significantly decreased, that shouldn't be an expectation that we force on men or stigmatize them if they just don't adhere to that. You also bring up the baby boys.
Oh, God.
Baby boys are more emotionally reactive than baby girls. I don't know if you're aware of that, John, but that is a fact of the matter, that baby boys react to more emotion. They express more emotion, but it's once they get older that starts to decrease. And they've done studies with communication styles of mothers, and they found that the mother would be very receptive and cool and chill when the daughter was being very emotionally expressive, but not so much with the boys. And it's not surprising that by the time they were 6 years old, boys had less emotional intelligence. A lot of that is, again, because of socialization. You ask why I care, what your opinion is. You say, do I honestly think that anybody is gonna, or why I would care about what you say. But then you go on to say that hookup culture gets in people's brains. If hookup culture and these other ideals can subconsciously get in people's minds, I don't know why your ideas couldn't, unless you're really willing to bite that bullet. I guess you're really just that insignificant if you want to go that way. But again, a lot of these issues can be attributed to expectation. It's not that there are no differences between males and females. It's that expecting males and females to act a certain way solely because they might be biologically predisposed to this behavior does more harm than good. It destroys families. It negatively impacts children.
Hunter
it negatively impacts men.
I hate to admit it.
Let me go over
Hunter is correct in what he
here.
just said.
Even further, when you talk about how we should kind of go the direction of our biology, we're not a slave to biology. Not at all. Part of the reason that
No,
humans
bad
have
argument,
become
Hunter.
so
Bad,
advanced is
bad.
because we
Here-
recognize
Here's why I get so frustrated with Hunter. And maybe again, Hunter is also very young, so maybe he will grow out of this. But Hunter has these moments where he makes really good salient arguments, and then it's like almost with even out a transition, he goes into a really bad argument. With John Doyle, I feel like he's boring, and I feel like, okay, John, you're very smart. I get you're very smart, like fine, whatever, but like can you like at least like spice it up a little bit? Can you breathe? Can you do something? Like he's not making bad arguments. It's just like I'm not with John Doyle, I am not excited about any of the arguments that he's making. It's just like this. It's like this the whole time. With Hunter Avallone, I'm like, good argument, Hunter. No, Hunter, bad, Hunter. Good argument. No, bad. No, good argument, Hunter. No, bad. It's like, it's such a fucking roller coaster. And maybe this is just something that he is going to like, hopefully mature with age, where he is better able to identify the really good arguments from like the really bad arguments. But like right now, I really feel like I'm doing this. Like he's making some really good points, but he doesn't realize what the good points are. And then he immediately goes into a bad point and he doesn't distinguish between the two. And that's his biggest problem. Yes, and the fact that all I hear now when Hunter talks is that he has a small penis. That's like literally all I hear.
biological urges and desires that are not always right. That's how humans got to where they are today. Even more so, again, if a woman wants to be a caregiver or wants to be more nurturing with the family, that is by all means a-okay with me. But when you force it, why is it that women report more negative feelings when they are in these roles? Why is it that women report more depression when they are stay-at-home moms? This doesn't mean being a stay-at-home mom is bad. It doesn't mean it's bad for women to be nurturing. It means that it's more likely to result in negative outcomes when you try and enforce it on people. So I say, let's be real Americans and just let people live their lives freely so long as it's not hurting other people. Cope, John.
Okay, you guys will have a 15-minute crossfire. You can go at it however you want. Just 15 minutes free for all.
Would you mind?
Are you a little bit concerned that a lot of the evidence suggests that when you try to enforce these ideals, it results in negative outcomes? Do you feel like you're worsening the outcomes for a lot of people for the sake of an aesthetic of traditionalism?
Bad question.
No, it's not about, look, I understand. My intro is actually sort of
that was a bad question for Hunter to ask, because Hunter, like when you ask a question, do you feel like you're doing this? Hunter just gave all the power in the room to John Doyle. If you have the opportunity to ask a question of your opponent, you don't instantly give them all the power, because look what John Doyle just said. We don't even know what he's going to answer yet. But Hunter was like, John, do you feel like this? And John Doyle was like, nah. Like, that is a horrible question. You don't want to give your power away. You want to contain your power. What I would have done is like maybe something like, I would have said like a statement like, John, like, you know, here is a reason why your point of view might be leading to the destruction of the traditional marriage or whatever. Like, how would you argue against that point? Like at least give him something to respond to, not do you feel a certain way?
self-referential in this regard, like the 1950s thing. That's sort of a parody insofar as a lot of more progressive types would tend to associate my beliefs with like this, you know, fetishizing of the 1950s. That's not really my belief, so it is sort of a parody.
Wait, your opening wasn't your belief?
I'm not actually.
Are you walking back on your opening? Or?
No,
I'm
Hunter,
not actually
wrong.
thinking that we're gonna go back to the 1950s or something like that. I simply want stable marriages and stable families.
So do
if
I.
you don't mind, I have a couple things I wanted to address here, and then maybe we can get a back and forth going.
Well, hold on. We're still in the back and forth right now.
Oh,
Okay.
God.
So no, I'm not going to go up.
Hunter is about to. Oh, God. This is like, again, we're going to go back to sex references because apparently that's what we're doing tonight. This is like a young, inexperienced man overcompensating with regards to how vigorously they're approaching the issue. That's what it is. Hunter made some really good points up until this point, and now what he's going to do is he's going to turn into a total douche in the way that he's engaging in this free-for-all, and it's going to make him look like the asshole. And it's not even going to be about his points. He's going to look like the asshole in this approach.
that. If you care about stable marriages and stable families, why then are you advocating for the enforcement of these roles, which can be detrimental to stable families?
And again, who is doing the enforcing? I mean, your side controls virtually all of the messaging in this country. Every institution is promoting your message. I am the dissenting voice, which is why it's not actually a fair opinion to say, well, hookup culture.
That's not good either, John. Everyone's allowed to have an opinion.
John Doyle's over here speaking to an audience of a couple hundred people, and he's actually going to be the one controlling.
It's not just you. No, I think that it's not just you. It's like what I said in my beginning, is that it's not enforced by law or even by institutions.
So who's doing the enforcement?
Hold on. It is socially enforced.
By who?
There are all of society in many different ways.
Society.
There are expectations. Hold on. Wait. We live in a society, okay? Joker. But yes, there are social expectations. You heard the research I read from Pew Research. There are far more expectations that women adhere to more of these traditional roles. And when men are stay-at-home fathers, for example, that's not seen as acceptable.
I don't think that's absolutely the case. I mean, with your stay-at-home father example, I get that it's a touchy subject, so we will move on from that.
I'm not a stay-at-home dad, John, if that helps.
Who is enforcing all of these, gender roles? It doesn't happen. I'm young enough, you're young enough to remember having gone through the public education system, having gone through the cycle of programming to which we were exposed. There was never at any point this girls have to be these Handmaid's Tale slaves and they have to stay at home.
You're doing it. You're doing the thing where you straw man and make it
Hunter,
seem like nobody's saying you must not cry.
Hunter is forgetting one of the cardinal rules. What resists persists. Hunter learned nothing from his debate with Alex. And if you never saw the debate that Hunter did with Alex, go back and watch it. I streamed it on Alex and I did a whole reaction stream to it if Hunter took it off his channel. But it is definitely on my channel. What Hunter should have learned with his debate with Graphically Alex was that if you fight something aggressively, you're going to look like the asshole. But instead, if you kind of sit back and you're just all right, and you don't try to fight aggressively against your opponent, but instead you find ways to make your argument while you flow with your opponent and where your opponent's going, you're not going to look like the asshole and you're going to actually stand out a whole lot more. Hunter didn't learn anything. Look at him right here. Why is he getting this aggressive? This is totally unwarranted. John Doyle is about to win back a whole lot of points that he lost with the beginning of the debate simply because he's not behaving like a jackass. It's not even that he's saying anything that's really all that valuable. He's saying exactly the same stuff he said in the opening of the debate. He has no new arguments. So why does he look so much better right now than Hunter?
Or you are a little bitch. Nobody's saying this.
It is exactly
now. First of all, I recognize that you want to keep going back to the stay-at-home dad thing because it probably bothers you that I have a wife and 2 children and I'm living the trad life. You're living the mad life. I get it. But even more so, when I'm talking about these social expectations, they are subtle, John. They're not these in your face telling people that they must agree or must believe this way. They've done studies, for example, where they have asked middle schoolers, draw a picture of a scientist. Virtually everyone in that study draws a picture of a man. There's a reason why
this is correct, bot. Hunter, Hunter is doing this. There we go. Hunter is doing this because he's insecure. Again, this is growth that both John Doyle and Hunter Avallone need to kind of lean into over the next several years. They need to become more secure in their arguments. Stop trying to convince other people of your arguments. I know this is a debate, but there is a balance to be had regarding I'm going to say my points, and if you agree with them, fine, and if you don't agree with them, that's fine too. Try to flow with it a little bit more. This aggressive fighting, it doesn't convince anyone. It just makes you look like a jackass, and I understand that's ironic with me saying that, but sometimes we're better at helping other people than we are ourselves. But if both of them just relaxed and stopped fighting with each other, they would actually probably get their points across a whole lot better than they are right now.
Does a more masculine career. That is social conditioning, which we can change.
The reason that they draw scientists as a men is something like 90% of scientists are men or something.
Why?
The
Why
same
is
reason,
that? Thank you for proving my point. Yes.
because males excel in the higher levels of things like the hard sciences and things like, I mean, even as I read in the intro, the ratio is 13-1. Boys that score over 700 on the math section of their SATs compared to women, it's 13-1. That is biological. The same way that women are more likely to pursue things like early education, things like nursing than are men. That is biological. Also,
I just can't believe
the-
you're telling me the decisions people make are just biological, as if it's not a
100%.
super complicated. Hold on, as if there's not a
100%.
super complicated and nuanced thing that goes on between, yes, some biology, but also social. We are all a result of our biology
Sure.
interacting with society.
The social
The decisions we
construction would be
made are
the
not just
idea
purely biological.
of the scientist. The scientist can't be found in nature. That is a social construction. Construction. The mechanisms in our brain making us want to go towards those things are biological. Those are innate. Also, the quip about you being married and me not, you'll have to refer me to which Norman Rockwell painting depicted you knocking up a woman, walking away, hooking up with another woman, and then going back to her once she was pregnant. I don't think that's very traditional. I will say that. I will tell
Now
you.
it's very cute that you have like this tabloid understanding of
that
what
was so low. That was so low what John Doyle just did there. That was so low. Like, bro, for all the shit that we can talk about Hunter Avallone, and we can talk copious amounts of shit about Hunter Avallone. The fact of the matter is Hunter Avallone is in a relationship, is married. His wife is lovely. She really is. He's got 2 kids. He's doing the right thing. He's younger. No, he's not. I was about to get haughty on a point I was wrong by. Okay, he's only a few years older than John Doyle. Like, that was an incredible low blow, and it added absolutely no value to any of this. John Doyle, in all likelihood, is still a fucking virgin. So what? Listen, this fucking purity test that you assholes make YouTubers stand up to, you guys understand, right? That human beings are not actually perfect. Every single fucking YouTuber that you watch is probably fucking around in some way or another. And the reason I know that is because normal human beings fuck around. Normal human beings do this. If you think people like this aren't doing that, if you think that people on the internet are pure and are living up to this high moral standard that their audience pretends to have for them, you are going to be grossly, grossly, grossly disappointed. I promise you. Keep people's personal lives out of it. It has no relevance at all. And almost every single person has dirt in their background, or quite frankly, if they don't have dirt in their background, they fucking wish they did. But this purity test that people pretend to hold other people to, why? Why do you guys get off on trying to make other people live up to an impossible standard of purity? It makes no godly sense at all. Hunter is doing the right thing. He's in a healthy relationship, so far as I understand. He's got 2 kids. Why would you throw that back in his face? He ultimately did the right thing.
happened. Maybe if you've been reading up on some celebrity news, but virtually none of that was true, what you
Wrong.
just said. But even
Wrong.
more so, well, I know it's easier for you to derail into ad homs when you're obviously
Wow.
demonstrated to be completely wrong here. So men going into sciences is largely because it's expected to be a masculine and male career.
Why?
Wait, hold on. Women have made massive contributions to the sciences, even in a time when women were not expected to, or were even actively discouraged from pursuing those things.
God damn it.
Now is
Another
more
point for Hunter.
acceptable, but there is
I fucking hate that Hunter Avallone is winning this debate. I hate that he's winning this debate, but John Doyle just made a major misstep for me. And listen, like, people who have watched my past Sassy Saturdays that John Doyle has been on, I actually usually give John Doyle the benefit of the doubt because, again, I think he is very smart. I think he is exceptional for his age. But, like, that attack on Hunter's personal life, where it had no relevance at all, like, that lost a lot of points for me with John Doyle. Also, additionally, because he's either a virgin or he's a massive hypocrite. One of two things is true in regards to John Doyle. He is either a virgin or he is a massive, 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 massive fucking hypocrite. It's one of those two things. Nothing wrong with being a virgin, I suppose. But the repressed sexual energy is going to get him at some point.
Still subconscious biases that take place. This is why you can see, like, how common is it for a little boy to hear, hey, you should go pursue math. Hey, you should go do science. You should do these things. It's not that they're going to actively say, you're a girl, you can't do it. It's more so that that might just not be encouraged for them. And if we know that something as subtle as, another study I'll reference real quickly,
exactly,
we know that something as subtle as just
nothing says being on the losing side like attacking your opponent's personal life. Nothing says I have no valid arguments at all against what you're saying than attacking someone's personal life. A lesson that Adam Krigler could damn well learn himself.
Having a picture in the textbook that depicts a masculine or a man in as a scientist is less, or it negatively affects women's ability to succeed. There was something that happened in the late 90s called the Scully effect. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but when the X-Files came out, it depicted a female scientist, which wasn't like the first time that happened, but after that, it was called the Scully effect, where a huge increase of girls wanted to be scientists. There is a social component here. It's a lot easier and almost lazier to just say, it's just brains, men are men, women are women, okay? It's a lot more difficult to contend with what we can actually change.
Nobody's denying that men and women are free to pursue the roles as they will, but we know that throughout, 800 BC to 1950 AD, virtually 95% of all technological and scientific innovation came from European men. The idea that that was happening because they were allowed to, and all these women with all these great ideas were just being shut out of the discussion, is just frankly not true. Also, the idea that negative stereotypes are preventing women from going into these fields, we know that's not true as well. There have been several studies proving that if you discourage women, you can't be a scientist, you can't be a doctor. It literally does not affect either their performance nor their interest in those fields. There was a study, though, recently in 2021 that tried to review all of that and say, no, this actually is the case. And then they got caught fabricating their numbers. In terms of the X-Files thing, maybe, but I mean, that's the 1990s. Look, I mean, you're reaching like the peak of when all this messaging, which I can't believe you deny the fact there are institutions, grants, funding, all of these organizations telling women, you can be a doctor, you can be a scientist. When's the last time you saw a straight white man in a commercial? It doesn't exist. All of the programming in this country.
Wait, hold on.
I
recognize that you're trying to go down the special snowflake route here, okay? But before we start playing
victim, he never left 2016.
There are still massive, there are still massive amounts of white males on TV, okay? I'm pretty confident about that one. But again, even if these institutions are trying to push forward an idea that women can do it, you're ignoring the social component. There is, in fact, different social expectations and stigmas. And I keep going back to the stay-at-home dad thing because you're talking out of two sides of your mouth. You're saying there's not really much of a social stigma, but then you're perpetuating the social stigma.
God, Hunter's
you're
right.
Trying to discourage women.
He's
from pursuing
right.
These career fields. And I don't know why that is.
That's
Women are not a slave to their biology.
All, on the stay-at-home dads thing, I have no ill will or disrespect towards dads who are staying at home. What I am discouraging is the idea that these roles are malleable and it's a simple coin toss. I am saying that men and women flourish best when they are following their roles, when they are pursuing what is complementary to them in their nature.
What are their roles? That changes. What a role is, what a role is for a man has changed significantly.
And you say that, but that's not actually true. It may have changed in terms of things like attire, aesthetics, penis size. But what doesn't change is the
Lucky for
fundamental
you.
role of the man as the protector and the provider. Even in the societies where men are spending the most time with children, the nurturers, I believe it's like the Aka pygmies in Africa, even then, the males are only spending about 40 minutes a day with the child, and the women are still spending 10 times amount that time. So you can say that, oh, the differences are malleable. The big differences are not. I don't really care what some guy's hairstyle was or what his statue was looking like. The biological reality of our situation, as articulated, has remained the same, and it's only changing, not in that all of a sudden women are becoming men and things like that. It's just that now they're not attracted to each other and they're not getting married because of that actual social pressure and actual social conditioning, which you seem to want to ignore.
No,
When's the last
there's
time
a
you've seen
reason why
anything
people are getting
depicting to the
married later.
opposite?
Again, it can largely be attributed to economic reasons. We can't just point to a problem and just blame whatever we want to blame. It's largely because of economic reasons as to why people are getting married later in life. And again, I am not denying biology. You keep going back to this. However, you're really going to tell me that there was a time when it was masculine to cry. There was a time when what it meant to be a man, how you were expected to behave, was different. Just if there are some similarities as far as the protective nature, I'm fine with that. Again, a lot of that can be attributed to, yes, biology, testosterone. If you are stronger and by protecting your family, you need to be physically able to fight someone off, yeah, the male's probably going to be the protector. No shit. However, that's one, not necessarily the case nowadays. And two, we would then want to talk about what does it even mean to be the protector? There are different ways to protect a family. Not all of it is physical protection. And so what it means to be a man, how men are expected to behave, has changed. It's different. Nowadays, boys are not encouraged to show emotion. It's considered very weak. It's considered feminine. It's considered girly. But yet, I point to the example of, yes, where it used to be chivalrous for men to weep. It was called chivalrous weeping. And that was a thing. That was a masculine trait. So there can be biological consistencies across human history. I'm fine with that. I'm more interested in talking about what we can change. What can we do to make society better? And by acknowledging that there are certain social expectations that we place on people, we expect them to act a certain way. If we can acknowledge that, that means we can also change these things. We can make it so that families are more stable. We can make it so that if a man unfortunately loses his job, he's not more likely to get divorced because his self-esteem is suddenly in the toilet. We can make these changes.
Hunter, again, is making very good points.
I like that. We can all go home on a good note, can't we? In terms of the emotional aspect of it, I have never heard nor witnessed anybody see a man crying at his father's funeral or at the birth of his child and being like, man up, pussy. That's like this sort of like
this. You keep doing it. No one says that men shouldn't cry at their father's funeral. Dude.
No, but what they do say, it is
men
true
want to express emotion by crying.
If a man is crying at like the ceremony you mentioned, the chivalrous ceremony, no one is going to turn an eye to that then. The same way as something I guess would be the equivalent now. No one would turn an eye to that negatively. The same way now, if you have men crying over things like, I'm like really nervous about this test, or back then like, I don't want to do jousting practice. Like, yeah, okay, quit being a little bitch. Like there's a reason that stoicism is a virtue. As a man, you have to be stoic because like we mentioned in the baby studies, when something goes
I don't
down,
believe that stoicism is a virtue.
Oh, maybe you have a gun. Maybe, police are there. I don't know. It depends on what city. People look to you for the answer.
It depends entirely on the circumstance.
Girls look to the little baby boys more often than vice versa. That's why stoicism is a virtue as a man. Being in control of your emotions to portray strength is, even if you are weak. No one's saying that weakness is a problem, but you have an obligation to those around you as a man to portray strength.
No, you don't. You have no obligation.
You're doing it right now.
You have no obligation to anyone else around you in any circumstance. I detest these arguments that says you have an obligation to do something because other people want you to do that thing. No, you do not. You do not have any obligation to anyone else unless you have voluntarily agreed to do the thing that is being asked of you. But to say, you need to make society better, you have an obligation to make society better by doing this thing. You know who else says that? Communists. We hear it all the time on Socialism Saturdays. You have an obligation to do this thing because it's for the greater good of society. John Doyle is literally making that exact same argument right now, except he's making it for the right instead of the left. No one has an obligation to anyone else. Just live your life.
This idea that because you're a man, you have a responsibility to
Real?
portray strength
Yes,
all
you do.
the time.
That is true.
No, that is not true. And you're once again enforcing this idea. This is what leads
George
to
is the king of the chat for the
repressing,
night. King of the chat,
emotions, the
George.
mechanism.
Thank you for
which
your
has already been
service.
demonstrated to increase likelihood of committing suicide.
Guys, the
That's not
fanfic
true. The
is
reason
pinned
men
to the
are
top of
killing
the chat,
themselves isn't
also in the
because they can't
description.
talk about their emotions.
Written by
Let's
John
dispel
Morgan.
with this fiction that that's the reason that that's going on. Men are killing themselves because we
Yeah, so guys, we do Socialism Saturdays on Saturdays around about 6 p.m. most Saturdays, and there's a whole playlist of Socialism Saturdays on the channel if you would like to go and peruse the back catalog. But basically, we watch socialism, real socialism, not AOC, not Bernie Sanders, not CNN. We watch the real deal, and we listen to their dystopian talking points, and that happens on Saturdays around about 6 p.m. most Saturdays, Eastern.
see no way forward. It is harder for us to achieve the economic prospects that our fathers or that our grandmothers have, which Hunter is right. It is because of things like offshoring manufacturing, frankly, gender bias in terms of higher education, things like that. Men just don't see the prospects. And if men don't see a way out of a situation, we are more likely to be despondent. We are more likely to kill ourselves. Also, what's very important about that in terms of the male suicide and how that relates to emotion, like we mentioned earlier, when men were held to the highest standards of how they were supposed to behave as men in the 1950s, they weren't killing themselves as often. They weren't as depressed as often. This is like a new invention for whatever reason.
Because a lot of the problems here is that some of these expectations are being almost accentuated. So we have social media, which is isolating people. We still have social expectations that you as a man have a responsibility
This is a really great point from Andrew, and I didn't see this just a minute ago, but Andrew says, stoicism by itself is not a virtue. It is the pursuit of virtue. Those are two very different things. Excellent point, Andrew. Thank you.
Give off the impression that you're strong at all times. These things all compounded, yes, the economy, all of these issues compounded lead to more negative outcomes, specifically for men. Even more so, hold on, they've done studies where they've literally shown that men are less likely to go to the fucking doctor because they perceive that as being weak. These are the type of ideas.
That is. I'll walk it off. That's funny.
You can't always walk. Some of it you can walk off, but not always.
One thing I want to get into, and I think this is an interesting phenomenon that we've witnessed often. Well, so that too, I mean, that is men. I don't think it's necessarily weakness. You know, I'm sure the men in the audience, it's not necessarily weakness like, oh, the doctor's going to think I'm. It's more just like who cares? You know, who cares? I think that women tend to be more sort of on the ball with those things, which is good.
Well,
they're
why do
nurturing.
men
They're
die more?
empathetic. They're like,
Men
you're
die
hurt.
earlier.
You don't even know it. I'm going to tell you that. And the men are like, nah, I'm not hurt. And then it is the case. But here's something interesting.
Men die earlier, John.
I think that anybody, well, it's because we're, taking more risks because of our testosterone, by the way. Testosterone isn't just, I'm doing manual labor. It's your risk aversion. It's your ambition. It's your competition levels. It's everything. And women have less than that. And that's why they are the way that they are, which is lovely, by the way. We love women, don't we, folks? Everyone loves women. No one loves them more than me. That is a fact. But something I did want to get into, this is a very interesting social phenomenon that we're seeing, where I think, even if Hunter may disagree, I don't think he does, there is a monopoly.
Time's up.
Can I continue with my 5 minutes?
Well, you have 5 minutes next. You can continue then. Yes. We're
And-
starting the second
that's
segment.
not fair at
We're
all.
so back.
We have-
Trust the plan.
I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start crying right here, right now.
Well,
And I will embrace you. I will understand this is very traumatic for you. There is a very interesting phenomenon going on.
this will be your 5 seconds by. We're starting the second segment, so you have 5 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Trust the plan. Okay. There's a very interesting phenomenon occurring now, which is you see throughout all of the institutions, literally a monopoly. I mean, we're told, whether it's in the mainstream media or in education, counselors we used to
That
have
is
to meet
something
with
a
when I was,
virgin would
7 years
say.
old, talking about all these things that children typically wouldn't have thought of before our country became so backwards. Men are taught from a very young age the opposite of what he's claiming with this vague narrative of society. Men are taught it's okay to be soft and tender, express emotions. Men typically don't want to do that. What men like to do when they express emotions is go, this sucks. I'm upset. I'm going to try to channel that in a way that's more productive. They don't like it when you do that, because that implies a threat to, frankly, their established power structure. Men getting together and going, this is wrong. I want to change it. And so here's an interesting phenomenon. Look at Jordan Peterson. This guy was teaching at a university in Canada, all of a sudden becomes an overnight sensation. Now he speaks to sold out arenas, missed me, all throughout the world. Sold out arenas all throughout the world. And he's teaching young men not to embrace their emotions and whine, but rather get it together, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And his audience is overwhelmingly male. Why is that resonating with young men? Or guys like Andrew Tate. He goes viral overnight telling men, you have to get it together. You have to be better. Contrast this with the self-help literature for women. If you've ever thumbed through one of these, it really is a sobering experience, boys. All of their rhetoric is not, you need to do this. You need to be taking cold showers. You suck. Get better. And guys are like, yes. You read the ones that are written for women. It's all like, you deserve to feel like you matter, and you deserve to feel this, and you are entitled to this, which is great. That is what women need to hear, but let's not pretend that these two things are the same. Like we mentioned with their depression, women feel more depressed when they feel like they are not able to contribute to the well-being of those around them. Men feel depressed when we feel like, I don't know what they're doing, but like, I know I'm screwed and there's no way out of this. And that's just the reality of our situation. And I think that if maybe how much time do I have? Oh, okay. We'll do it. My tight 15, right? My open mic. If you had situations where all of a sudden people were coming out with this new idea of like, guys, what if we could just like cry? Why would you then not see that overnight viral sensation with people who hadn't heard that and gone, wait a minute, this one guy is talking about that. I'm going to follow that.
Why do you assume you haven't?
True that there's this big.
Why do you assume you haven't? There have absolutely been men who have gone viral talking about stuff like that. Here is the problem with fucking YouTubers and political content creators in general. They really and truly believe that the influencers in their space are the only influencers that exist. Listen, guys, I was in the fucking HR space for like 10 years. Before I started doing this, before I started doing like political YouTube crap. And let me tell you what, there is a whole other band of influencers that have just as many followers, that have just as many subscribers, that have just as many views, that get just as much media in the HR space that are completely unknown in the politics space. So when John Doyle is saying, like, no man has ever gone viral saying that they're just going to cry on the, like, there have absolutely been men who have done that. It's just not in the realm that John Doyle is aware of it. There is a whole big world outside of politics. There is a whole big world outside of this one niche of YouTube that these people have never heard of. And this is one of the things that honestly drives me most crazy about this space. And that's probably because I was in another space before this, and I know there's a whole other space out there. And I mean, for whatever you want, there are niches out there for everyone. There are influencers out there in every single niche. Just because you are not aware of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Monopoly of Jordan Peterson's being like, don't cry, man up. You'd expect someone like Hunter Avallone to come onto the scene and be like, actually, you can cry. And then all of a sudden, he would be speaking to sold out arenas. But this just isn't the case. There is a monopoly, as evidenced by those who break through as dissenting voices, all of a sudden, basically achieving like the entire market share, because it just doesn't exist. Because men are taught now that they're supposed to embrace their feelings and be sad, and that's okay. And women are taught that, like, well, you're supposed to be more assertive and less agreeable and things like that. And this is fine. Men can be like that. Women can be like that. But ultimately, it is against our nature. And when we start LARPing as these like androgynous freaks, we're less likely to get married. Sure, if the economic prospects were fixed, you'd see more marriages, but it cannot be understated that men know that the state of the modern woman is not so good. And women definitely know that the state of the modern man is also not so good. I mean, the average modern man is like this overweight, porn-addicted slob.
Yeah,
and you're like,
and this is also a really great point. Another great point from Andrew. John's even being myopic in his view of Jordan Peterson. Didn't he just openly cry in the Piers Morgan interview? Jordan Peterson has been openly crying like all over the place. Jordan Peterson has been openly crying for like no apparent reason. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but to say that like men can't go viral crying, Jordan Peterson literally has not that long ago.
Wife, and it doesn't exist. And moreover, the average woman, you know, the birth control, the SSRIs, she's just like all over the place. That's why these social trends through the sexual revolution, by the way, that's inarguable, that's a consensus, that these things have happened, and that is bad. So we actually do have in our power to make the world a better place. We can undo that conditioning. We can undo that propaganda. When me and my cool friends take power, we will.
You have 5 minutes.
All right, so I think that you said something like men are taught to be in touch with their feelings and talk about their feelings. I recognize that colloquially, emotions and feelings are used interchangeably. I use them interchangeably before too.
They are
However, there
interchangeable.
actually is a difference between feelings and emotions.
No.
So emotions
No.
specifically refer to, and John, you're going to love this, a biological response, actual brain chemistry that responds to certain things. This is why sadness is one of the fundamental
No,
emotions.
Hunter.
Whereas anger is actually a secondary emotion.
No.
It is still a real emotion, but it's largely because
Hunter,
it comes from an
bad
underlying
Hunter, bad
foundational
Hunter.
emotion. Feelings, on the other hand, are purely conscious. These are things,
No.
yes, that you feel in your head, you think
This
about.
is so
They're
wrong.
not actually, there's not
No
a
one listen
biological
to
response.
anything Hunter is
So,
saying right now.
is
He
there a
is
time and a
wrong on,
place
like,
to be
18
open and
different
vulnerable
levels.
about your emotions? Yes, of course. I am not saying that men should just be crying every day, all day, any chance they get. Neither should women. Everybody should have a grasp and control over their emotions. But that's called emotional intelligence. And part of being emotionally intelligent is also recognizing the time and the place where it is appropriate to be vulnerable, whether it's with friends or a partner, where it is okay to cry and express sadness. This should not be something that is always looked down upon. It should not be something that men are expected to be stoic at all times. These are harmful ideals. They lead to, I know I've already said this, but they lead to repressing emotions, and that increases likelihood of suicide, mental health problems, etc. You also talk about how a lot of the institutions are against this idea or the ideas of masculinity that you're pushing for because masculine men are sort of a threat to the institutions. I don't know where you're getting this from because throughout, especially throughout the past 100 years or so, every massive threat to the institutions or the mainstream has been people vocalizing their problems. So if you want to talk about MLK, he challenged the institutions at the time, and that was done vocally. That was not done because he had some physical muscular strength or because he was suppressing his emotions. That didn't happen. People have risen to power time and time again through rhetoric and through being—
Hang on, Deborah's making a good point that I should acknowledge. So in counseling programs, anger is taught as a secondary emotion based on fear, which is a primary emotion. Okay, fair enough. I mean, you could make the argument that the two base emotions that everyone has and like all emotions can be reduced to these two emotions are you're always acting from either love or fear. Like every single other emotion that we have can be reduced to either love or fear. But the issue that I have with Hunter is he's not describing that. So he may be getting the whole anger secondary emotion thing, but he's not understanding the underlying emotion to that, which is why I think he's wrong.
able to win over a crowd rather than being the most muscular, tall, buff dude who's never emotional. You also mentioned earlier, not in the thing you just said, but beforehand, you talked about men sometimes will feel depressed because they fail to— You missed me also, I don't know.
Let's go.
But you also said earlier that like maybe men feel depressed if they're not providing because they're failing to live up to this role. And maybe they, I know you didn't say maybe they should feel depressed, but you said maybe they feel this way because yeah, they are failing. We decide what these roles are for men. We have decided that the role is going to be for you as a man to be the primary breadwinner. This does not necessarily have to be the role for a man. So it sounds almost like what you said earlier there that almost kind of proves my point that when you fail to meet or live up to these arbitrary roles, you worsen your own mental well-being. You raise the likelihood of divorce. And I don't know why you would be in favor of any of that. Let me see if there's anything else I have here.
Where John does beat Hunter is in terms of like
At the end of the day,
improv.
I just think it's really important to, again, recognize that biology is real. There's a difference between males and females. Anybody claiming otherwise is delusional. There is a difference between males and females. However, we are not a slave to our biology. We are not a slave to evolution. And women, when they are forced in these roles that are usually seen as more natural for their biology, do not always do well, because it's the enforcement that is the problem. It's not necessarily the gender roles that are the problem.
John, you'll have 5 minutes.
You mentioned stoicism, kind of. Stoicism is good. I meant to elaborate on this earlier, particularly with men, because our strength gives us a little bit more of an edge than women.
All right.
And our
How much
strength has
longer do we have
potential
in
to
this
be bad.
debate?
So if we're not in control of
Oh,
our
a
emotions,
while yet.
things can get
Jesus
bad
Christ.
for those around us pretty quickly. Now, if you take women and give them a little bit of testosterone, which is how you get lesbians, they have the highest rate of domestic abuse. Female-female relationships. I don't know if you know that. That is a fact. Repressing emotions, again, has literally no link to suicide. If you look at the people who now are committing suicide, it's not because they didn't think that they could talk about their emotions, well, the men in particular, or because they thought that like everything was just so doom and gloom and there's no outlet. It is because they see no way forward. That is why during the highest standards of that type of society says you can't do this, which would be like virtually any year from our history, probably even human history up until the 1950s and 1960s, men weren't committing suicide at even comparable rates to what they are now. So the only thing that changed is that Hunter's ideas became normalized through the long march of the institutions, and my ideas didn't. And now all of a sudden men are committing suicide, to which this will say, well, you can't just attribute it to one problem. And it's like, well, I'm not. I mean, you look at
All
the
right,
state
guys.
who's
I want to
committing
know
the
who
most
you
suicide
think
in
is
this
winning the
country.
debate. I
It's
just put a
white
poll in the
men.
chat on YouTube.
Why is that? White men are demonized in virtually every institution. They are taught that they are lesser than, they're not as cool or unique as women or people of color or whatever. And because of that, they don't see a way forward. They are literally discriminated against. Because by the way, when you say that we're favoring women, we're favoring people of color, that's a really interesting PR way of saying that you are discriminating against white men. And of course, that's why they're committing suicide.
Wait,
if it were because of these
no.
harmful cultural stereotypes, you'd expect Asian men, who of course we all know are held to far higher
thought I
standards
screwed
of
up
how
my
they should
knitting when I
conduct
didn't.
themselves as
Thank
men and as
God.
women, but they're not committing suicide in this country nearly at the rate that white men are. So argument, BTFO'd, liberalism canceled. Also, he brought up the MLK thing. We're excited about this. MLK, like feminism, was literally propped up by elite donors because they wanted to see social change in the country. This is a fact. I don't have time to elaborate on it here. I did a whole hour-and-a-half video explaining this history. This is a very common liberal historiography.
I feel
They
the
go
way,
through
same
these
way. Go
long
64.
social changes, usually in
I came into this really thinking that John Doyle was gonna wipe the floor with Hunter. I really did, and I don't feel that way. I don't.
forced by legislating from the bench on the Supreme Court. And then they write the history books such as everyone just woke up one day and thought, you know what, men can get married. Black people, they're not that bad. What is this crazy backwards? Your grandpa was a racist. He didn't know better than we do now. This is obviously not the way that history actually goes. It is always propped up through the institutions. And then after they seize the power, it's always, hey, good guys won again. What are the odds? So in terms of, speaking truth to power, it wasn't so much that. It's status, it's charisma, how you seize power, which again are all things that men tend to display more and that women tend to almost exclusively be attracted to when seeking partners. So who's enforcing this? Women, literally women. There's not like this vague zeitgeist of society. Who's enforcing this? He's right. It is men and women, because as much as we might like to say, oh, we all want to be egalitarian or whatever. If you go tell your wife like, hey, I actually want to be staying at home and I actually want to be super soft and tender, try that. I dare you to try that experiment, because that feminist conditioning will erode very quickly. She will all of a sudden view you as a pathetic, impotent loser, and she will move on to somebody who displays more stereotypically masculine traits. That is a fact. Name me one pop culture figure who has been propped up on a girl's, door or whatever that has been like this, maybe recently with Harry Styles, estrogen, it is what it is, but it's John Wayne, it's James Bond, it's all of these characters. Even now, no
That's
one's
not
looking at
true.
a hero in a movie and being like, wow,
That
this
is
guy's
not
so
true.
cool. I just love the
I'm
way that
sorry.
he's super
Listen,
open.
man, I was a child of the 90s. I had all those fucking teeny bopper magazines. I had the pictures on my wall, okay? And they didn't look like John Wayne. They didn't look like that. So that is not true at all, and it hasn't been true for a while. This is John Doyle projecting the idyllic 1950s America that he is so desperate to recreate onto everyone else. It is not true.
About how saving the city like affected him. It's like, no one cares. No one cares. Being cool, calm, collected, that is what people think is cool. And yeah, in terms of slave to biology, those people are the happiest. Like, oh my gosh, I am doing the thing that I am programmed to do. I'm happiest all of a sudden. This is so odd. We're not talking about being a slave to biology the way a lot of Hunter's constituents are, where they're like, if it feels good, do it. We're actually talking about the opposite. Controlling biology insofar as you're going to transcend the level of an ape, but also following that which you were programmed to do by evolution or by Jesus Christ, which is get together,
Oh
get
my
married, and have lots of kids.
Jesus Christ.
So this idea that if you go home to your wife and want to talk about your feelings, she's somehow going to leave or something, just isn't borne out at all by the data. There did a study of... It's okay, guys. You can talk it over with a therapist, okay? So they did a study of over 1,500 women, and they found that 95% of those women said that they would...
All right, well, I see I have a lot of John Doyle stans watching today, or as graphically Alex likes to call them, doilies. I don't agree with the poll. I do not believe that John Doyle is winning, but you guys won this round, I guess.
prefer a man who is, yes, open about his emotions. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just about making sure you're being open about your emotions in an appropriate time and place. You say that people are happier when they follow their biology or whatnot. This isn't necessarily true. I feel like you're just forgetting what I already said about the stay-at-home moms who have more depression.
the doilies screwed the
women
poll.
who have more negative experiences.
Damn
and
it,
negative emotions
doilies.
when they are in these caregiving positions. Being forced in these positions or being forced or even expected to adhere to your biological nature does not make people happier. And many times it makes people worse off. You say that there's no link to suppressing emotion and suicide. I'm going to quote one of your favorite institutions, probably in the entire world, the American Psychological Association.
Oh, God.
Which
Why
has
would you
weighed
do
in and
that,
said
Hunter?
that a lot of these rigid roles that we expect from men do, in fact, contribute, yes, to depression, more substance abuse, and early death.
Doyle
You
again.
talk about Asian men. You say that,
I
well,
like you,
what about
Trippy
Asian men?
Liquids.
They
I
have
hope
these
you stick around.
expectations. I'm not super hip on that, but I don't know what Asian men are expected to not cry. They have expectations, sure, but I don't know how much of those expectations are suppress emotion. So it's not just expectations that are the problem. It's harmful expectations. You talk about MLK having donors or whatnot. That's fine. That doesn't mean that he wasn't ultimately challenging the broad institutions at the time and pushing against the narrative that was commonplace at the time, which was, yes, a racist narrative. This idea that black people and white people were or black people were lesser, they need to be segregated, whatnot. MLK was using his voice to challenge many of these institutions at the time, and receiving donations does not disprove that. Last but not least, you talk about what women are attracted to. You say that it's women who are doing this. I don't know why you don't think that women couldn't also be socialized. If women are born into a world where they too are taught, hey, what a good man looks like is someone who's stoic, dominant, aggressive, never shows his emotions, then she's more likely, yes, to be attracted to that kind of equality. This is why, for example, back a long time ago, fat women were seen as more attractive because it symbolized wealth, it symbolized power. And so even what we as humans find attraction,
Well, it actually symbolized who had the
that can
food.
change.
That was
And
what
so
it
if
symbolized.
women find certain masculine norms as being attractive, that does not disprove anything that I've said about the socialization aspect. So TradCon owned.
Oh my God, Hunter. Jesus.
All right, that ends our second segment. And we will now move on to the closing statements. Since you guys agreed that John would have a longer opening but a short closing, John, you will have 5 minutes for your closing
You mentioned therapy, therapists, things like that. You'll notice when you talk about therapy culture, if you pry long enough, what people like about their therapists is that they basically provide to them someone to speak to. And it is true, as we've both mentioned, that there has been a social degradation in this country, and that is very bad. But the answer to that is not to like become weaker and become more like whiny about things. The answer is to actually try and go about fixing that, which you can only do through strength. And you're not going to convince me that some like 93 IQ, 27-year-old with like a psych degree is really going to provide insight into my problems that like my dad won't or my grandpa won't or what have you. Women saying, well, I wish my man would be more open about his emotions. Of course she said that. I can't figure out what he's thinking. Try it. I dare you to try if you're really upset about something, that's fine. I respect that. Every day, complain to your woman, complain about, or not your woman. I shouldn't say that. That's possessive. Complain to your partner about what your respective problems may be. See how far that gets you. She will pretty soon portray or perceive you to be weak, and she will not be interested in you for very much longer after that. In most cases, there are exceptions, but this is a tendency that does exist. In terms of it makes them happier he said it doesn't make them happier being slaves to biology, being in these relationships. But the metric for that he cited was they report more feelings of stress, of struggling, of being unhappy temporarily. That's sure. But like we said in the data that was cited in my intro, of the women who are the happiest, they are all those who have said they've had to make concessions and sacrifices for their family. That is what meaning is, making sacrifice for something that is greater than oneself, being stressed out, dealing with obnoxious children. I'm not pretending that it's like this very happy experience. It is stressful, but ultimately the magic that you will be able to create in that child's life as a parent is greater than anything else that you could ever pursue on this planet. That is true. MLK challenging the power structures. What? Like, you mean the federal government that was on his side and literally had like white students at bayonet when they were forcing integration? That power really speaking truth to all the billionaires in society who benefited from that. Watch the video. In terms of the APA guidelines, what he's referring to there are some guidelines that were issued by the APA, which of course is notoriously bipartisan, talking about how these harmful standards of masculinity hurt men's feelings. This was basically laughed at. There were multiple studies, including one that was peer reviewed by about 12 different scholars, saying that not only does this not reflect the data that we have on males and females, it's actually like clinically not even useful and perhaps might even be more harmful than it would be useful in addressing the problems that males might be more likely to feel. The fat women are attractive. Opposite is the case. Men, because men, status, resources. I am sorry to say
That's
this, but
not
there's not been
true.
a case in human history where people have looked at fat women and been like, nice. It doesn't exist. And also, even if that is the case, who in those other cultures? I mean, maybe it is true, but it's standards. Who is sending these letters to the pygmies in Africa? To people.
Listen, I'm going to tell you this. Number one, there was a whole period of Renaissance art in which basically only depicted fat women. And that was because fat women were seen as more desirable because they had access to the food. That is what that was. But I'll tell you this, as a woman who has never been a size 2 in my life, there are a lot of really, 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 really attractive men that have always liked women like me. It's never been a problem. It really has never been a problem. And this goes back to high school, man. There are men in high school who will never admit it to their peer group, but they didn't want the cheerleader. They wanted the tomboy. And any woman who has ever been a tomboy, I think, will absolutely back me up on this one. Emo Dante, what does that make thick women? I have no idea, Emo Dante. Mark Robichaud says guilty. Never been a problem, dude. Never in the history of my life has it been a
To people in
problem.
Venezuela, Vietnam. Who is telling these people you actually have to be like really like, stoic and you have to be the provider and the protector? These things are downstream from our biology. He has not been able to actually acknowledge the implication
Mark
of that.
Robichaud wanted
He'll
the
say,
goth
of course,
chicks.
the fact that men and women are different. True.
Was
but
it
he
the
refuses to
eyeliner,
get
Mark?
into the implications of that in terms of how it affects
Patrick
our behavior
loved the
differently,
tomboys.
which is universally the
It's
same
true.
throughout the world, throughout world history, and also
And do you know why? Yes, exactly. Bigger women have the baby hips. It is biological. We have the hips.
babies. If it were true that like neuroplasticity, you would expect to see like a little bit of leeway. Maybe if we're ambitious 50-50, I would even settle with 10%, but it's not. It is virtually always the same. And that is because men are men, women are women. And I'm kind of like an Aristotelian natural law kind of guy, kind of like a Jesus kind of guy. So if you are following that which you are programmed to do, chances are it's going to optimize your capacity for flourishing as a human being. Right now, contrary to my opponent's belief, the institutions are actively dissuading people, actively making it more difficult to get married, to meet a moral spouse. But that does not mean that our biology has changed. And perhaps there's a reason for the fact that the individual who is the most likely to benefit from the freedom of my opponent's ideas is also the profile of the most depressed person in this country. That is the middle-aged, single, working woman with no children. Why is she the most depressed if she has had the most to benefit throughout the last 60 years of social engineering? And if she isn't the most depressed, or if she is, but it's just like a temporary dip, we're buying at the dip, let me know when the uptake is, and I'll look forward to like egalitarian, gender-inclusive Wakanda or something.
All right, Hunter, you have 10 minutes for your closing before we move on to the Q&A.
I'm probably not going to need 10 minutes. So, John, you keep going back to the biology thing, and then I just keep saying the same thing, and then it's like a repeat constantly. So I already have acknowledged that there is biological differences, and even if people are behaving certain ways because of their biology, that's fine. None of that is the problem. The problem is when you try to enforce this, when you try to stigmatize people who do not adhere to your preferred version of these gender roles. You even did it just a minute ago when you started talking about therapy. You associated therapy with weakness, with being weak. It is not weak to seek help for your mental well-being. That is not weakness. And the fact that you're considering it to be weak is, again, demonstrating my point. This idea that if men are vulnerable or they show emotion or they go to therapy, that they're somehow weak or lesser of a man, that is contributing to more depression. That is contributing to higher suicide rates for men. And that's also contributing to the potential to destabilize marriages, as I've already said in my opening. You also talk about men being strong and strength and how important that is. Strength is important across the board. This strength is not something that's only important for men. Everybody should be strong in their own respect. And one of the ways you can be strong is also by being vulnerable, is also by recognizing the time and the place to express emotions, even if that is uncomfortable. A strong person is able to be in touch with their emotions and work through that through a healthy way, not by just suppressing it and being stoic because I got to be a man, bro. You talk about how quickly your partner would get fed up if you're constantly complaining to them. I agree. Talking about your emotions is not the same thing as complaining. Nobody likes a complainer, but talking about your emotions is not the same thing as complaining all the time to your partner. You also talk about women being happier when they've sacrificed for their family. I think this is a perfect example of a really good value that doesn't need to be gendered. The idea that you should sacrifice for your own desires for the family, yes, you should. If you have a family, then sorry, you are in many ways no longer number one. You do have to make sacrifices, but this isn't just for women. This isn't just for men. And if women were happier, I'm sure that you can find studies that show that men are happier as well, because having children and having a family is one of the best and most fulfilling experiences that you can have in life. So this is a perfect example of where something does not need to be gendered. A lot of these ideas that I think you push for under the guise
I agree
of
with Hunter.
traditional
God
gender
damn it.
roles
I hate that I
are
agree
not
with
necessarily
Hunter.
bad. Provide for your family. Be strong when the time and the place is appropriate. These are good things.
I
Be the
truly hate that I agree with
Provide
him.
for your family. All of these things I agree with. I don't agree with you wanting to stigmatize people who break away from that. And I also don't agree that these need to be gendered. I think that a lot of these values are really good values to have, but they're good values for everybody to have. And I think that that's really the most important thing that we should be looking at. So at the end of the day, gender roles are largely influenced by society. We can make a change, and if we can acknowledge where some of these expectations are doing harm, then that means that we can all work towards making a better future for men, for women, and for the stability of the nuclear family. So these are all the reasons why I don't think that traditional gender roles need to be enforced. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter, and thank you, John. So I'll give a round of applause to our debaters, please.
right, this has a little bit more to go. They have a Q&A, I guess. Listen, man. I guess they're gonna go into a Q&A now, and we'll definitely watch that because I definitely want to see the audience kind of like ask them questions and stuff. But I will say, like, I think Hunter won. I'm sorry. You guys, like, people who have watched my other streams about these two, I generally almost always take John Doyle's side because I think that John Doyle usually overpowers Hunter. But I have to give Hunter a lot of credit here. And you guys know I don't like giving Hunter credit, but I do have to give him credit. I think that he was prepared for this reasonably well. I think that he was much more interesting to watch. I think that his points came across more hard hitting to me than John's did. Now, don't get me wrong. John was an avalanche of information. He was like, look at me, I'm so smart. Look at me, I'm so smart. Look at me, I'm so smart. And he did say a lot of smart things. And I'm not suggesting at all that John Doyle is that smart, but what John Doyle needs to do is refine his debate style a little bit, because it's like when you just pile one point on top of another 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 point, you lose people after a while. I thought Hunter did a good job. I really did. I think Hunter did very, very well in this. There were times when I was like, it was like I said earlier, it was like a roller coaster for me. It was like, good Hunter. No, 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 Hunter. Bad, 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 bad. No, okay, good Hunter. You're back on the right track. No, bad Hunter. It was like, it was a roller coaster for me. Either he was right on with what he was saying, or it was so awful and cringe that I just wanted to like reach through the screen and be like, Hunter, shut the fuck up right now. But ultimately, I think Hunter won. I do. I think he won. And it kills me to say it.
If you would like to ask a question, we're going to form a line right here where everybody can ask a question. We have 20 minutes and before we get kicked out of here, and we have to do the quick meet and greet at the end of it. But if you'd like to ask a question, just line up here and we'll have somebody hold a mic and you can ask any question. Please specify who it's towards, if it's Hunter, John, or both of them. We'll just need a quick minute to set up the camera here and then we'll be starting the Q&A.
All right,
Yeah,
do
so
the
this
Q&A.
is for Hunter, and John actually touched on this a little bit about specifically the men who commit suicide more is white men. And looking at the past in America, we see white men have been the most emasculated by far. Looking at other people, like John brought up Asians have very strong gender roles, generally speaking. If you look at black men, they're often perceived as a lot more masculine. If you look at Hispanic men, they want to go out and build houses for 12 hours a day. So my question is, if you see this evidence, once you break down subsets of men pointing to John being right, how do you actually explain that?
Well, when it comes to a lot of these issues, kind of like I said, I think that a lot of it is accentuated by other circumstances as well. So just if you see differences in certain men's well-being as compared to other men, does not mean that there isn't still certain social stigma that can play a role. So sure, maybe, I don't know what the suicide rate is specifically for black men as opposed to white men, but last I checked, there is still a higher suicide rate in that area. So a lot of this, again, it comes back to two things. Is one, certain social expectations, but it's not just social expectations. It's the fact that these social expectations have been accentuated by other circumstances, like a poorer economy, less job opportunity, less socialization, and more social media and more isolation.
This one's for John. Is it safe to say that the reason you are currently single is that you're saving yourself for Brett Cooper?
Oh, man. Like, she's a very nice girl. I've met her in person. We get along great. Okay, I'm a businessman. My job is to get along with people.
Oh, you're not a businessman,
tremendous
John.
girl doing
Come
great
on.
work over at Daily Wire, and I wish her the best with all of that.
He's blushing.
Well, I don't mean that, and like I'm
He's
just
blushing.
saying. Very fine person. Very fine person. I hear great things about Brett.
Hey, John, thanks for being here tonight. I must say, you're looking very sharp, very handsome, as always. My question is unrelated to this debate, but with Trump announcing tomorrow, I'm just curious your condensed view on the Trump 2024 situation.
My what on the Trump 24 situation?
Condensed view, just on it all.
Well, my condensed view, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not, are the cameras off?
We're not streaming, but the cameras are on.
That's funny.
I can say this. By then, it'll be past. Yours truly is actually headed to a very special place tomorrow for a very special announcement, which I'm very excited about. Look, I've been on the Trump train for 7 years. I mean, I just did a whole 2-hour video about why that is. The bottom line is basically that there is something very real about we call it the friend-enemy distinction in politics. For some reason, all of our enemies as normal American people are aligning themselves with challengers like Ron DeSantis. He is talking to the same establishment donors that were supporting people like Jeb Bush. I mean, that's who he's in bed with. He also doesn't have the name recognition. He doesn't have the ego. And he doesn't have
That's
the money
interesting
to
that
fund a
John
campaign
Doyle doesn't
independently
like Ron
Donald Trump did. So if
DeSantis.
he wants to take on literally the
That's
most
interesting. I didn't
popular
realize
political
that.
figure in America, he's going to have to get in bed with the worst people in the country who are watering at the mouth waiting for him to do so. He wouldn't get it. It would be political suicide. I hope he's going to be smart. But yeah, I am on the Trump train. I would do anything that Donald Trump told me. I don't, at any point. And if Ron DeSantis is the nominee, then I'm going to go work for Gavin Newsom's campaign.
Wow. Really?
Hi, this question is for John. I
Wow.
just had some points of clarification I wanted to ask you about. So in your opening, you claimed that men are more interested in games, competition-based activities and items, correct?
Yes.
And women are more interested in cooperation, activities like that, and are more focused on people, right?
Yes.
And you also claimed that women, I don't remember your wording, but women define success as something that helps others. If you could remind me exactly what you said right then.
Yeah, there was a study done and it showed that women are far more likely, almost over 3 times more likely to say that they agree with the sentence that is, I am happiest when I am doing something that makes other people around me happy, things like that. And women, I mean, as we know, now that we don't have to cite sources or whatever, everyone knows that women are much more social than men, that they're much more concerned about what others
That's not
think
true.
than men are.
That's actually really not true. So what it is there are extremely slight preferences for women to be more people oriented and men to be more process oriented. Extremely slight. And they're not even statistically significant. So there are extremely slight preferences for women to be more focused on people, extremely slight preferences for men to be more focused on process, but they are not even statistically significant. So John Doyle is not correct about this. Sorry.
Men are far more independent. Men are far more focused on, the sort of introspective element of it. And so, yeah, it is true that in terms of females pursuing things which make them the happiest, that is largely implicated by the attitudes of those around them.
Okay, great. So I just had a question of, with all that being said, why do you think males are better leaders? Because personally, I would want a leader who's more cooperative and more relationship and personally based, and rather than someone who is only looking
Well,
for
your personal preferences,
just
honey, are
competition
not
and more
reflective
focused
of
on
everyone.
items, material objects. If you could
Sure.
explain that to me.
I think that when you're talking about political power, when working up the ladder, that's one thing. But in terms of who a leader should be, I don't think that they necessarily have to be concerned about the opinion of the masses, so to speak. I mean, I'm anti-liberal, anti-democratic. Democracy is cringe. We all know the line.
Hang on. AD says these preferences are more pronounced in more egalitarian societies and less so in not so egalitarian societies. I mean, that might be, but I'm talking about in our society in the United States right now, across millions and millions and millions of surveys that have been taken, it is not a statistically significant difference. Dragonwater says, Happy Thanksgiving to Carlin in the chat. Happy Thanksgiving, Dragonwater. I hope you had a wonderful day.
Because the masses are, to quote the Iranian gentleman, retarded. People are heavily influenced by what they're seeing on the screen. And so I think that leaders are inspiring loyalty, maybe by being the guy who has the best reputation in terms of making good decisions, but also things are very important like charisma, saying things that people resonate with. I'm not saying that that is the only thing that makes a good leader, but I think that's ultimately far more fatalistic in what actually gets us our leaders. And so I don't think that taking the input, maybe in a situation, if everyone in this room were going to go get food, that would be okay. But if you poll people on issues now, especially after decades of media conditioning, I don't exactly trust the opinion of them. You need someone to get in there and just do what is right, regardless of the opinion of like the masses. And I mean, Plato articulated this quite well with the ship. You know, we may all be affected by the decisions of the captain, but that doesn't mean that we get to all take turns steering the wheel. There are people who are competent. They are natural aristocrats. They know what is best, and God bless them if they can get towards the necessary levels of power to actually use that for good. But our system, because it is democratic, has actually basically incentivized like the most sociopathic and evil people to get to power, because it's dependent on if people like you. Okay, well, people give you money who want you to say these things, and then their friends in the media promote you as like the superstar candidate. Whereas, you know, if you had a monarchy or something like that, you were trained from birth to have an obligation to your people, to the lower classes, to the peasants. You don't see that now because everything is, you know, free, open society. Now the upper class almost feels like they earned it or something, like the lower classes are therefore lesser than. And this wasn't the case in formerly or anti-democratic societies throughout history. If that makes sense.
No, you are not allowed to ask any more questions. Why did they cut the
So
sound?
I
Oh,
think you avoided my question a little bit because everything you described on like a leader, they don't need to be like cooperation like based or like be more interested in like people rather than things. Women can do what you just said, like get in there.
this is
and
so
not
cringe.
necessarily do what
Stop
everyone does and
arguing
make
with
everyone
him.
happy, but
You're
do
not
what is
making
right.
good
Women
points.
can do that.
Stop doing.
And
Listen,
it's, like, you
listen.
can-
I know she's young. I know she's in college, and I shouldn't punch down like this. But like women like this are the fucking problem. Women like this are the fucking problem. There might be a kernel of a good point in beneath something that she is saying, but she's coming across to me as extremely whiny, and I don't know what she's trying to say. And it's like John Doyle is going to eat this woman fucking alive. Do you have any idea, Alicia, what the point of a reaction stream is? Alicia, you're no better than this college woman we're seeing right now that does not have a salient point. If you don't want to watch a reaction stream, then just go watch the video for yourself. It's really not that difficult. But no, not everyone wants a leader that is a more passive leader. That is just not the purpose. A lot of people respond to that strong, powerful leadership model. In fact, most people do, which is why most people in leadership positions have that strong, powerful role.
kind of went off around, you kind of avoided my question about like democracy and stuff like that. So what exactly like makes like males like better leaders than women?
I apologize. I thought you were appealing to democracy in your question in terms of like considering the opinion of the people over whom they govern. In terms of like what makes a man a better leader, he's far less influenced by emotions. He's far more willing to do what needs to be done for the people over whom he governs than women are. Women are far more likely to allow emotional impulses to govern their judgment. And I think that the historical record is very clear that this doesn't make for good societies. Even frankly, you know, a common talking point is like, I wish we had a woman in charge. She'd go to war less. If you look at female leaders between 1400 and 1900 AD in Europe, they're far more likely to declare war and go to war with these other countries than male leaders were. So I think that would probably be it. We're more stoic, we're more composed, you know, things like that. Which
I'd
I
like
know
to
is
weigh
like
in
a
really
sexist
quick.
point of view, but it's sexist insofar as it understands gender the same way like a dentist would understand teeth, I think.
I want to weigh in on this really quickly. So obviously what makes a good leader is going to depend on in what context they need to lead. So for example, they've done studies where they found that when women are in top executive positions they studied over 1,000 different companies, and they found that companies that had women in top executive positions, those companies outperformed all of their competitors by near 25%. Even more so, this idea that women are governed by their emotion and men are just the rational ones is just complete nonsense. So there's two different studies that completely just debunk this, okay? The first one being a study that was done recently where they tracked over 152 men and women, and a group of those women were actually even on their period at the time, John, and they found that men and women in that group all reported near identical emotional fluctuation.
Oh, bullshit.
Not to mention, they've done another study.
I'm sorry. No, that is not correct. No. Hunter, you are married to a woman who I assume you cohabitate with, and you're going to tell me with a straight face that women and men have the same emotional fluctuations when a woman is on her period? No. No, Hunter. No. That is incorrect. I don't care what the women self-report. That is incorrect. And I'm pretty sure that every woman in the chat who has ever experienced a period in their life will agree with me on this point. That is just making things up. Self-reported emotions are not accurate in terms of studies. People are mostly unaware of what emotions they're feeling at any given point because the part of our brain that processes emotions is the subconscious part of our brain. It is not the conscious part, it is the subconscious part. It is completely incorrect to say that women who are on their period are not having dramatically higher and more strenuous emotional fluctuations than the average man. Mark Robichaud says, I have chocolate on hand for reasons. Exactly, Mark. Exactly. Blackwell Disco, in history, women are more likely to go to war because they are more likely to be invaded. I hate that argument. It doesn't hold water. I mean, I guess. I guess I agree with that. Alicia is welcome to have whatever opinions she wants, but Alicia right now is watching a reaction video. So if Alicia doesn't want me to interrupt the video to react to it, then what Alicia needs to do is go watch the original video. It's really not that hard. She can find it on YouTube. My God. Yes, self-reported emotions are not accurate for diagnosis. They are not accurate. No, this is not correct, Lizard. Don't fucking lie. Again, you are usually not consciously aware of the emotions that you're experiencing. It does not depend. There are massive amounts of hormones are being pumped throughout your body. You're going to have an emotional reaction to it. You may not be aware of it, but you are absolutely going to have an emotional reaction to it. Mark Robichaud, it's called the wolf moon for a reason. I will take your word for it, Mark. And AD says gender dysphoria is self-reported. Well, that's a whole other thing, AD. That is a whole other level of diagnosis.
Where they presented men and women with complex moral decisions regarding torture, animal science, abortion, things like this. And they did find that women had a more emotional response. However, the rationale behind the
Again, Lizard, how you feel consciously does not... I think the electricity just fluctuated in my house. If I leave at any moment, it's because the electricity went out. Just because you consciously feel fine does not mean you are not having subconscious emotional spikes. Our emotions are processed in the subconscious part of our brain. We are not, I will keep repeating this as many times as I need to for you guys to get it. We are not usually consciously aware of what emotions we are experiencing at any given moment. Therefore, you saying, I'm feeling pretty good, doesn't actually mean anything because you are probably not consciously aware of the emotions that you are experiencing based on whatever is going on at any given point. It is rare that people are consciously aware of their emotions. We see this all the time. We see women, especially, flying off the handle when they're PMSing and not even realize they're flying off the handle because they are not consciously aware of their emotions because our emotions are processed in the subconscious part of our brain. You are not the exception to this. No one is the exception to this. It's the way it goes.
The decisions made were no different. Men and women were virtually identical when it came to making rational decisions. Emotion is not actually the antithesis to rationale.
I have a brief response to that. I was implicated. The study that he's referring to with the corporate executives thing, this is a very ad hoc sort of approach where you have these corporations, they don't want a media backlash, they want to look favorable to their donors and everything, so they appoint women to avoid lawsuits. I'm sure they do a great job, but in terms of leadership, who's going to get you across the river, not be across already and be like, okay, my turn. Show me a company that's trading on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange that was started in a garage and becomes like a multi-billion-dollar company. Every one that you can show me that was started by women and led to that success, there's 100 that were started by men. This is just the nature of the game. I'm sorry. In terms of experience versus, the emotional experience versus acting on that, like we said, men are better at controlling that emotion. We might experience it, but we're better at controlling it. Better decisions as implicated by like they treated animals better, I guess. I don't know.
There were moral decisions. There were questions.
That's even in
asked.
itself egalitarian. Your moral obligation is to your people. And I don't care if like it's easier to move the raccoon out of the deck instead of shoot it with a shotgun. Like at a certain point, you just have to do what is right by the people. So, and again, the historical record speaks for this. I mean, we really think that if like it was, women instead of men, that we'd all be better off. I don't think anybody actually thinks that. Maybe there's a study with some fun, hypothetical ethical experiments. That's great. But we've had thousands of years of this. And I think that the record is pretty clear.
Well, the thousands of years that you keep referencing are ignoring all kinds of context there, first and foremost. Second of all,
humans are flawed.
Well, hold on, wait. I don't know why you're telling a bedtime story right now to the audience about this study. You're making something up because you're coping over the fact that this study clearly shows that when women are in top executive positions, the companies outperform their competitors by near 25%. This was a study done in 29 different countries with over 1,000 companies. So you can't just tell a story and try to explain it away. That's coping.
You totally can. Show me then those decisions that were made. Establish a common variable and then find some causal link from there. You're going, oh my gosh, the biggest companies are implementing DEI training, but this is like evidence of it's winning. No, show me one that has been built from the ground up by a disproportionate amount of female leaders relative to men, and then I will believe you. But this is just
women-owned businesses all over the place, obviously, are still significantly in the minority. However, again, the study that I'm keep referencing, you keep on trying to like run away from and say, show me a woman who started a company in a garage. No, the study that I'm referencing demonstrates that there is a strong correlation between women in top executive positions and the company performing better. What that demonstrates is that women do very much.
You can't really study that though. Listen, I guarantee you whatever study Hunter is citing right now is not actually going to be applicable to the point Hunter is trying to make, because it is near impossible. And I say this as an organizational psychologist. I know I'm wearing a funny hat right now that I made out of yarn, so it might like not come across as the most serious thing, but like it is not possible to study what Hunter is saying and have that be broadly generalizable to like the entire population. It is not possible. Just because a woman is in a top level executive position does not mean that she is contributing in any way, shape, or form to the success of the company. She could actually be hindering the success of the company. We don't know because we don't know what position she's in. We don't know what she's doing. Maybe she's like the fucking chief HR officer and they just keep her around for show. And she actually inhibits the success of the company because she's brought in stupid DEI trainings, but she's still on the executive team of the company. Just because a woman is an executive does not mean she's contributing. On that topic, just because a man is an executive doesn't mean he's contributing. It depends entirely on the person, the position, and the individual circumstances. This is not something that you can find in and easily quantify in a study. AD says correlation does not equal causation, Hunter. That is a great point, AD. What is the correlation coefficient and what are the confounding factors? Oh, AD, we can tell you're taking classes right now. Yes, exactly. Exactly correct. That's exactly right. Most studies, guys, are not broadly applicable to the general world. There is a big difference between what you learn in school and what you actually do in the real world. The studies that you're going to read when you're in school and how you see those studies applied in the real world. Big, monstrous difference.
For leaders, or just be as good of leaders as men.
Which I accept the possibility of that. But this idea that like, okay, so that's one way to look at it. He is accurate in that. Another way to look at it, which is probably the case, which is that big companies have a social incentive to include more women, more people of color in their top executives. There are NGOs and leftist institutions that literally track this. And if someone's out of line, they have their media watchdog groups go after these people, which affects
Here's the
the
cope.
stock.
This is the code.
Rationalization is a cope, ladies and gentlemen.
This is
Don't
the
ever
cope,
think
buddy.
about things. Believe the screen people.
No, rationality is not the cope, but trying to just fill in the blanks and say, well, they were probably all just like liberal institutions who were incentivized.
Literally, yes.
That's coping.
All right, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
This question is for John. You advocated for the restoration of traditional gender roles, and you claimed that that was due to our biological proclivities. So, like, if we were to go about restoring those, would you say it is more on our part to do a proactive, like, instillment of those behaviors, or is it more just like a hands-off, repealing of the long march through the institutions?
Both. I mean, it depends on what level or what level of power you and the individual's life would achieve. I mean, if you're in a position where you can actually remove some of these negative incentives, by all means do that. But ultimately, not everyone is going to be in that position. So it's not really one or the other. I think there is a little bit of nuance there. And, you in your own life can accept that you as a man are the provider, you are, the protector and things like that. And you'll find women actually respect you a lot more for that. I'm sure there are very successful relationships out there where this is not the case. But again, we're talking about tendencies and biological realities, which of course are upheld throughout culture and world history, things like that. So if you as a man are looking to become a better man, you can look at all the men throughout history who built a country, and you can be like, I kind of want to act more like that. I mean, why does this not make sense? They clearly had a general idea as to what they were doing, much more so than people who now want to write articles for Vox.com talking about how like going to therapy is like actually good. You want to reduce symptoms of depression? What, go
Going
a
to therapy
therapist,
can
get
be good.
prescribed like what, Prozac? Creatine,
Not all
the workout
therapists
supplement,
prescribe medicine.
outperforms SSRIs in terms of reducing symptoms of depression. You want to stop being
Is
depressed?
John Doyle a Scientologist? I'm honestly asking because like it kind of makes he kind of seems like he thinks that all therapists prescribe medication. Listen, I'm not the great defender of therapists. I think the APA is completely corrupt. I think the profession of psychology, and I say this as a psychologist, is completely corrupted by this woke bullshit. But there are amazing therapists out there. There are amazing therapists that are not prescribing medication, that are doing their job like they have always done before, and they're like it's not the same thing. Now, I would actually personally think a great therapist would prescribe things like going to the gym, getting active, like making sure you're surrounding yourself with like positive people. But to say that like all therapists are just going to prescribe antidepressants is completely not true. And there are great therapists out there that are doing exactly what they should be doing.
Get vitamin D, go outside, get active. That's how you reduce it in at least men.
Thank you.
My question's for John. One day when you're super cool friends and you take power, what is the plan to address sort of the egalitarian anti-marriage propaganda in media and in politics, and what do you do in those positions of power to address that?
Well, I'll tell you something as a white pill. I just got back from DC and I was meeting with a lot of behind the scenes people because normally I'm in media. And so my idea of how over it is like it's over because all the media people are stupid. Political people behind the scenes are very smart and they're very calculated. Like it's incredible what these people can think of. And that's really the nature of politics. We can talk about like in the media, democracy and things like that. Behind the scenes, everyone's very aware of what's going on because it's a political power struggle. And so that was fun for me to hear about. But in terms of things like that, practical solutions, repealing the Civil Rights Act, that would be a great start. That violates the Constitution, real. Repealing things like no-fault divorce, things like that would be very good. Also, if you really wanted to like infiltrate things like the FCC, make it illegal to maybe broadcast things which are in contradiction to the flourishing of people. You can always find ways to word it or things like that.
What?
You'd get canceled, John.
I would be
What?
completely in support of that. Are you kidding me? Like, this idea, these guys, this is going.
Make it, hang on. John Doyle wants to make it illegal to broadcast things that he perceives to be counterproductive to the flourishing of people. Doesn't that violate, I don't know, the First Amendment? That seems rather authoritarian to me.
going on in the media. That's what you're supposed to do. No, no, thank you. We want men. We want women. That's what's normal. That's what we should be promoting to people. So there are ways you can do it, and it's really going to be dependent on when we
Wow.
can actually take over that power, which the historical record would say is going to be probably within our lifetimes, which is very exciting. So yeah.
Thank you both for coming to Knoxville.
Look at that guy's shoes.
All right, so my question is for Hunter. And do you think the increased consumption of processed foods, seed oils, and xenoestrogens from the 1950s to now, which is a proven direct correlation in a decrease in testosterone within men, has led to a progressive collapse in traditional gender roles, or is it purely due to like evolving social norms?
Sure. So, I mean, I would have to look into that. I haven't looked into, but if I take your word for it, then yes, of course, there are varying different reasons as to why specifically testosterone levels are dropping. And that could very well be one of them. Yes. On top of that, there's also the less demand for physical labor jobs, which reduces testosterone. And then, although not the only cause, even something as simple as smoking cigarettes, actually, cigarettes used to increase testosterone. Now that's decreasing. So we are seeing testosterone levels decrease, and the process.
I'm almost finished my shawl, guys. I just got a couple more rows.
Sure. But just to be clear, the social
Hang on, let me
gender
see if I can-
roles are not necessarily the same as testosterone levels dropping or rising.
Can I respond to that?
No, John.
It is completely correlated with testosterone. I mean,
God
you are
damn
your
it.
hormones. It influences every organ in your body, including your brain. And it is no coincidence that as we've seen men
Almost
become more feminine,
done.
they
Couple
start
more
to challenge
rows.
these ideas of like, oh, maybe I should just talk about my emotions more. Maybe I should just be more sensitive, things like that. It's completely correlated. And you're right on with the testosterone, with the seed oils. It's all lifestyle
Thank you,
related.
Toffee Nut.
Hunter's also right with the manufacture, well, the labor jobs, things like that, which we addressed. Those should come back. We should bring those back. We want free trade, but it has to be fair. And so those are all problems. But another thing that you're seeing is this idea that like, oh, testosterone is just doing this. It's just weird how that happens. Even as men get older, oh, it just drops when you're older. That is true, but a large component of that, which is not addressed, is the decades of accumulation of lifestyle factors that are harmful towards your endocrine system, which finally cause your testosterone
Almost
to
2
drop later in
months.
life. Obviously, that's
But
gonna
I've been
happen
knitting
anyways, but
slow.
in terms of the proportion at which it's happening, largely because
I've been
of
knitting very
environmental
slow for
factors.
some
Also,
reason.
would you like the red pill on cigarette smoking? This is something very interesting. So I just heard this weekend, actually. We've been smoking forever. I mean, this country was built on tobacco and caffeine. But the lung cancer only started somewhat recently when we started using things to fertilize and things to pesticides, things like that, that were integrating traces of phosphate, which is actually bioaccumulative with trace amounts of radiation. And so when you're smoking things that have, and that does affect the tobacco, over time, that has caused for rates of lung cancer to increase. And another great example of this is you look over in Japan, East Asia, they smoke like chimneys. They never had the same problems with lung cancers or mouth cancers that we did until borders open up. Now all of those Western cigarette brands are very popular in Japan, and now they're starting to see that tick up. So it's not so much the tobacco in itself, probably not the best idea, but it's like in terms of, oh, I don't want to do it because I get cancer. You can grow your, well, I don't think that's legal. One could grow their own tobacco, and they could avoid those problems to a
That was
large
funny.
degree.
So my question's for John, and you had mentioned that there's, institutions that are telling like white people to have less kids. Do you think a possible way to like troll these institutions, like for the memes, would be to have more kids?
Yeah, well, so that's the thing. Like, there's no greater
Hunter has had?
demonstration to the regime than just like marrying and having a bunch of kids. They literally call it ecological terrorism. Now, they don't do this in countries that aren't white. They say that's fine. It's only in Western countries, which are predominantly white, that they run this propaganda. And it's also always white people. I mean, you never see the fertility rate with immigrants from Latin America or Asia, the fertility rate with African Americans, which is substantially higher than that of the white American fertility rate. That's never criticized. It's always white people having kids. They literally, and too, this is reflected throughout this sort of cultural zeitgeist. People will share tweets of, see, I'm illiterate. I've been kicked off Twitter. I don't remember how it works. People will share
Oh, he's about to
photographs
get
of,
back
like,
on
large
Twitter,
white
isn't he?
families on Twitter.
Everyone's
And you
getting
see
back
all
on
these people tweeting.
Twitter.
There's something just wrong about this. They have been just instinctively off put to this idea of white people getting together and having kids. And honestly, like for that reason, I'd like to say it's because God, and it is, but spite is also something to consider. And so I think that it's absolutely right to troll the globalists, troll the libtards. We should just get together and have a bunch of kids and be happy. You'll be happier for it, which my opponents even acknowledged.
Can I weigh in just really quickly on that? So I recognize that there have certainly been some pretty cringy articles that have been discouraging people to have children. I don't know where the institutional push is for this, especially considering the fact that even now, I mean, the government in many ways can provide, well, it doesn't provide healthcare for everybody, even though it should, but the government can also provide different forms of welfare or Medicaid, which also helps people to have children as well. So I think that the idea that there's like this institutional push for white people to not have kids, I don't know where the institutional push is. When you
Happy
talk about the
Thanksgiving,
cringy
Mama.
tweets, yeah, it's Twitter. You can find almost any cringy shit on there. And it is cringy, by the way, to act like there's something wrong with people having children or because it's bad because white people have kids. That's all cringe. I don't know where the institutional push is. All I've seen are some cringy articles and some idiots on Twitter.
A lot of professors have been fired because they've been caught in their classrooms, repeating anti-white sentiments, calling for white
Oh
genocide,
God, fuck
calling for,
you, John.
extermination of white
Fuck
people, calling us
you.
inherently racist.
No, they
inherently offensive.
haven't.
So it's in academia. It's obviously in
That
the
is
media.
not true.
I mean, it's increasingly in things like the military.
John
which
Doyle is
understand the
not
foreign
being
legion, so you
correct
have
right
more
now.
non-American people coming into the country, being in the military, which is of course a very
I
important
did knit my
institution for
hat.
people sympathetic to our
I
ideas of
did.
control. So I would actually wonder, what institution is this not happening in? I mean, it's in all the NGOs, it's in the activist groups, it's in the courts, it's everywhere. It's like a cancer. And then that is, of course, being trickled down, if you will, into the psyche of the masses.
Well, I had kids despite the regime, so I'm good.
Thank you, Hunter. My next question would be with regards to mail-in voting. So, to my understanding, one of the reasons Democrats may be able to make some gains in some spots and pick up some seats is that they've developed pretty strong mail-in voting where they're essentially able to get.
Hang on, AD, we do not use that term on this channel. And for anyone that's watching right now, please do not use this term on this channel. This is a term that I have really, really profound issues with because it attracts horrible, toxic people. I do not allow it to be used on my channel. If you want to know why, you can go back and watch any of the content that I've done about the white identitarians. They flock to this term specifically, like moss to an open flame. We do not use this term on the channel ever.
Democrats that don't turn out very often to turn out more consistently, and that can like swing elections. In turn, to fight back, I believe that we should also establish our mail-in voting programs and build a system that way. Would you agree with that? Or
The idea is interesting. The problem is our people would never go for something like that. They would just be, because first of all, there's this sort of ethos of like, well, my principles and things like that. But then the other side of it is like, people just like to get out and go and vote. And the people who the Democrats are relying on not voting so they can use those ballots, people who are going to vote for Republicans tend to turn out very well. With Democrats, it's not exactly the case, but
don't.
I'll recall my experience in DC. It was very interesting because people who work in media, people who consume political media, always want to use these very romantic terms to talk about, voter fraud. It's happening. They're doing this. When you actually talk to people in DC, Democrats or Republicans, it's always just like, yeah, and then just go back to eating. And it's like, and so this is like really bad and like wrong, right? I don't know. Like, it's just so matter of fact to them. And so once Republicans, I guess, age into the level of willingness to maybe do what needs to be done to restore election integrity, then we can probably start to win elections again if we.
I don't care. That's not what the term means. That's not what it means. And again, I have done extensive research on this. I have documented this extensively. I do not allow that term on the channel in any way, ever.
We have enough time for that. But in the meantime, there's a reason that 2022 and 2020 went a certain way, and it's exactly because of what you've described.
Thank you.
Firstly, I just want to say that John got a compliment. So Hunter, you were looking dashing today.
Thank you.
I'm jealous of your wife. Though
Many are. It's okay.
I do have a question though. I understand you're looking at this the problem of mental health in America from two very different viewpoints. What can we do as individuals practically to help with this problem?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the times we as humans, I don't know, in the politics sphere, either way, we tend to create dichotomies that don't have to exist. So I don't think the issue is like what John said, go outside more, vitamin D, working out. He's right. These are all extremely beneficial for your mental well-being. But it's also true that therapy and even medication, if necessary, can also be beneficial for your well-being. It's not an either or. It's not competing ideals. It's that if you as an individual are feeling depressed and you're not looking to go to a therapist or take any kind of like pharmaceutical medication, then you should go outside. You should exercise. You should get out of your bubble. Try to make friends. There are ways that you can improve your own life just by doing these simple things. But again, it's not a dichotomy. It's not either or. They're not competing. They oftentimes will work very well together.
God damn it, Hunter is right again. I
I
fucking
would
hate it
say
when Hunter's
that
right.
It is also true that testosterone does decrease depression in men. And that's why women are more likely to experience, feelings of depression just because their emotions are what they are. Men are much less likely to experience that unless we're in a situation where the environment is particularly intruding to what we perceive to be our future well-being. And your brain, it's not just this thing. It is an organ. It is warning you that something is wrong. And oftentimes, you're seeing our generation in particular, they're inside all day. They're looking at screens all day. They don't have that community like Hunter mentioned, and they're depressed, and they think that like some lab coat has come up with a pill that's going to make them feel happy, and it ends up just turning them into like a zombie or something. Again, creatine outperforms SSRIs.
That's
Another
because
thing, though, it is
Hunter's
very
wife
true.
is
In male
a good
social
woman,
circles,
a good and
there's always
patient
been
woman.
this sort of, and this is a good critique, though I do think it's funny. So maybe
Guys,
there'll
if
be
you
more
want to
balance.
read
There's always
John
this, like,
Morgan's fan
sexual
fiction, it
McCarthyism,
is pinned to the top of
right?
the chat
Like,
and
what are
in
you,
the
gay? And, it's
description
charming,
below.
It's endearing. But there is something to be said about being able to be vulnerable with your male friends. You shouldn't do this on the internet. You shouldn't do this in public. I know it feels good to have everyone in the comments like, you're so brave. You should do this with trusted friends. And I think that establishing those male social circles, which honestly exists more than people might think, where it is okay to talk about your problems in a confided and confident sense, I think that it actually does make people feel that sense of community, which could be contributing to depression. But I think with young men in particular, it's probably half and half between that and just
All
lifestyle.
right, we're almost
in
done.
terms of not being active enough.
Almost done. 10 o'clock.
I actually agree a lot
Jeez.
that, yeah, having a community of friends is incredibly important for mental well-being. Although what you said about depression is warning you, I don't think that that's a very accurate summary of depression. They've looked at the brains of depressed people and they've found decreases in activity in the hippocampus, for example. So there are problems in the brain specifically that are sort of causing these feelings. And I don't think that those that feeling of despair or sadness or dread is necessarily like a warning that there's actually something wrong.
He's exactly right. There is a chemical difference in the brain. And the reason for that is because you're actually more than just like this meat sack and then a brain. You also have a soul. There's body, mind, and soul. And so if you take that into account, that there is a greater purpose, there is something greater than ourselves, you might do something that is morally wrong and think to yourself, I feel a state of despair because of this. You can explain it neurochemically and be like, oh, despair is actually when this secretes less of this hormone or whatever. You're experiencing despair because of something. There's something going on that has made your brain do that. They've just actually published landmark studies talking about the SSRI interpretation of why your brain does that in terms of, oh, it's just a chemical imbalance.
Why is he obsessed with SSRIs? Does anyone understand this? Why is John Doyle obsessed with
Your brain is
SSRIs?
warning you about something. Go to church, confess your sins. get
Oh,
with the
fuck
boys,
you, John.
Cuddle if you have to. I don't know. It's not gay. They want you to think it's gay.
It's,
they want
as long as you say no homo, it's not gay. You're good.
real. They want you to think there's a binary. It's more nuanced than that.
So we can all agree that we go gym.
We do go gym. We do a little go gym.
All right, John, my question is a little bit off topic, but pretty good, I think. Can you describe to us
Look
the
at all
dream
these
in which
college
Jake
kids
Paul
wearing
incepted
suit and
the white boy
ties.
summer checklist into your mind?
Well, first of all, Jake Paul is white excellence. I'm tired of pretending he's not. You look at guys like Jake Paul, guys like Tom Brady, people just get mad at them because they're like basically confident in
Yeah,
themselves.
but they're
And
like,
these
there
guys,
is more to
Jake
this
Paul in
than like
particular, he'll be asked a question like, don't you
SSRIs.
think it was like racist that you knocked out this?
I
like,
don't think
black
people should take
boxer?
those things. I
And
really
he's like
don't.
95 IQ, so he's like, no, I don't know, no, it's just a fight. He's so willing to dismiss that, but I don't know. He is white boy summer, and the whole idea with white boy summer as a meme is actually reflecting the fact that white guys, even if they won't acknowledge it to the extent.
Did you know that if you're on SSRIs, they won't let you do an ayahuasca ceremony? Because there's some like SSRIs are like, do not take SSRIs unless you are like in like an at like your back is against the wall and you have no other choice. Because SSRIs fuck with your brain really, really, really badly. They will not like it is astonishing to me that like SSRIs are so awful for you that they will not allow, like shamans will not allow you to do an ayahuasca ceremony if you are on SSRIs because it could go horribly, horribly wrong.
Extent that I will, are sick of being told that we're like these bozos who aren't good at anything, and we need people who are, better educated than us, from more vibrant cultures than us to come through and like take the reins of what is frankly the greatest civilization's ever been built from European men. Fact. And I think that if we can cope with that by kind of pretending that like we get our own summer, it's gonna be very positive for us. And if Jake Paul's the ambassador, I'll be Jake Paul's top guy. I don't care. He's a great guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. My question is for Hunter. You talk a lot about the societal impacts, enforcement of these stereotypes, but I'm curious if you can name a substantive way that that enforcement mechanism is engaged, because I can name plenty of ways that it's engaged in the opposite direction. I mean, we can look at the characterization of adult fathers, white men primarily, on cartoon television. So I'm wondering if you can get more than just saying society, Joker, ha ha ha, but actually get to the details and kind of give a recent example.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the great example is like what I mentioned before about the study where they found that even having something as subtle as a picture of a man as the scientist in the textbook can have these subconscious biases that can sort of be reinforced. So I think that there are more subtle examples, and I think that that's why it's a lot more challenging to point to sometimes, is because it's easy to say like, look, here's some dumbass online that said this, that, and the other thing. But there are also strong pushes still for these traditional norms from people like John, from other people who are high profile, who have large audiences. And so I think that a lot of it just comes from a lot more of a subtle reinforcement. And I think the study that demonstrated how women are less likely to do as well in math and science if the picture in front of them is that a man is the scientist or the mathematician is a pretty good indicator of that.
What does it say about sex differences where like women will be so dissuaded by a photograph that they'll be like, I don't want to do this anymore. And it'll just be like, sick, the scientist is a chick. Maybe I get to, and the male brain will do what it will. There have been studies on this sort of stereotype harm that have found that women are not, in fact, actually dissuaded. I'm assuming the study that he's referring to maybe is the big recent review from 2021.
Again, I don't think that is Hunter's strongest argument.
Prevalence was actually fabricating their numbers. So
No,
it's
that
not
was
just.
This is all really boring
Why
to me
would you
right
say
now,
that
and I'm
about
glad
women,
it's
that they're
almost
so
over because
sensitive
they're
and
just saying
coddled,
the
that one
same
photo
thing
would just
over and
dissuade
over
them
and over
from
again.
pursuing what is so obviously excellence. What is, they can see the horizon. They can build America back better than we even had it. We're stupid white men, and they would be off put by that because of a photograph. They're
It's
not
not
that
that they're-
fragile.
It's not that they're off put. It's that there are subconscious biases that can be reinforced. And I think that a lot of us underestimate the power that subconscious ideals can
That's
play
true.
in decision making in the future.
Hunter is correct. You're not aware of
Real
your
American
subconscious.
patriot.
Do you want to come up and
Let's
ask a
go.
question?
So, John, earlier you mentioned that fitness is a great example of male gender role. Can you just give us one for the boys? Why is fitness so important? Give us some motivation.
It's cool. I mean, I would like to tell you that if your OHP is this % of your body weight, then your confidence is going. It's cool. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do as a man. I forget who said this, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but those of us who lift are maybe familiar. What a tragedy it would be for a man to die and not see what his body could achieve in its highest form of potential, if you will. I mean, why would you not want to look like that? Why would you not want to be like that? And that's, of course, why there's no equivalent to, you're all familiar with the, what is it?
Hang on.
No, the
I want to
Chad-
acknowledge what Patrick is saying. My sister takes SSRIs since she started on them. Her mood has greatly improved and she stopped self-harming. Listen, I'm not saying there's no place for SSRIs. I just think in regards to like antidepressants, like I think that there could be positive short-term benefit, but if your sister stays on them for her entire life, she's probably not going to it's not going to be good for her. That's not, I mean, there are always exceptions, and I'm not going to, everyone's mental health is their thing to deal with. And I can acknowledge a positive short-term benefit to these things, but long-term, I have just seen way, 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 way too many people hurt by these things. They become dependent on these things. They think that these things are the only thing that can make them feel better, and it's just not true. There are any type number of solutions to helping people like stabilize their mood, that are not medication. And long term, they can have very detrimental effects, especially if they're abused. So again, like if they're working for your sister now, I'm really glad for it. I guess my thought process has always been that I'm completely in favor of like a short-term intervention. I am not at all in favor of it becoming a lifetime prescription. I just think there are better ways to handle it.
The Giga Chad, right. There will never be an equivalent of the Giga Chad for women. There just won't be, because men will look at someone who is literally like comically in shape and be like, I need to do that. I need to be better. Women will look at a bikini model that's like starved herself for months and be like, this is not nice. I cannot do this. And so we're more competitive in the sense that we want to aspire to that. And women, they're more just like, well, I'm the best and everyone else needs to kind of get away. So I think it's incredibly important.
That's not what women are like at all, John, but good luck getting laid
which
at
as a
any
man,
point
I
in
mean,
this
if you have
lifetime.
confidence, you can do anything. They always say that you can do anything you put your mind to. No, you can't. You have to
John
be
Doyle just
confident
told us
in
he
that you
doesn't
can do that.
understand
That's what they mean
women.
by putting your mind to it. You have to be confident. You can't just be like, I think I could do this. You have to know it, right? And in order to do that, I think you need to work out. No one's going to take you seriously. Also, I mean, Chris Christie, great politician. No one takes him seriously. There's something about physiognomy that's very real. And as much as we might like to think otherwise, it's the case. So you want to look your best.
No one takes him
dress
seriously.
nice, well-groomed.
No one takes Chris Christie seriously. Chris Christie became governor of New Jersey and was a presidential candidate. No one takes Chris Christie seriously. A lot of people took Chris Christie seriously, John. A lot of people did. Alex, you had to get in here for the end, didn't you? We're wrapping up. Next time, Alex.
But also be in shape. Look like you could handle your own. People will respect you more for it.
Just to weigh in very quickly, I agree a lot with what you have said there, John, as far as how important it is to exercise and confidence and whatnot. But I think this is also a good example of something that doesn't need to be gendered. Now, of course, if you're a male and you have testosterone, the ability to exercise is going to result in more muscle accumulation and whatnot. Again, biology is real. I never said otherwise. However, working out and exercising is beneficial for everybody's mental well-being, everybody's confidence. And so I don't think this is necessarily something that needs to be for the men to do. I think that everybody should aspire to live healthier lives.
This is just a comment, but thank you to both of you for just putting the time out to come out here. I'm with the Georgia State Turning Point, and with the two guys over there with the MAGA hats, and they're big fans. By the way, John Doyle, they're really big. We're really big fans of you. And we drove 3 hours all the way from Atlanta to get here, like 3 hours long. So thank you. I don't know if you have like a schedule, like if it's like not too packed. If you have time, like sometime next semester.
Hang on. Blackwell Disco says Christie was a horrible politician, so bad I paid to say so. I mean, I don't like, listen, man, if you get elected governor of a state, like Julie says, Christie got elected twice as a governor in a deep blue state. Like, he can't be that bad of a politician. People voted for him.
Would you be open to just coming out to our campus if you're open to campus speaking on campuses and stuff?
Yeah, I would love to do that. I just send me an email. It's available on my YouTube. In terms of that, can we get the three gentlemen or three?
Yes.
Can we get the three gentlemen who drove all this way to come to the dinner with us?
Yes.
Can we do
please.
that? Let's
Yes.
go.
We love
Can
to
we?
teach. Yes. Definitely.
Let's go.
Everything.
Let's
yes.
go. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. See, well, this is the problem. You give them an inch and then.
So wait, am I just not invited then, or?
No, totally. No, please.
What's the deal?
No, we love a picture with you too. Hunter,
Look, we love Hunter. I mean, the first thing I said to this guy was like, dude, I'm a fan. I remember watching Hunter Avallone in 2016. This is the glory days, Doc Hudson, Hunter Avallone, running circles around the SJWs. Now, not so much. But we have a lot of respect for Hunter.
I still like to run the circles around the SJWs, all right? Not every liberal-leaning person is an SJW.
Yeah, I agree with this, Andrew. Hunter is making common sense arguments. That's why
Now
his
I am
are
gonna
landing
cry,
better.
so.
I agree.
Thank you everybody for great questions. Let's give everybody a round of applause.
All right, guys. I think that's all we have for the stream today. Again, Hunter did a really good job. I was shocked and amazed at how on point Hunter was. I mean, not with everything. Like I said, Hunter was a roller coaster. There were moments he was really good and there were moments he was really bad. But like, I would take Hunter over John Doyle any day because John Doyle was just flat at kind of the same speed throughout the debate. But like, John Doyle also came across to me as like really inauthentic, to be honest. Like, I thought like Hunter was more of like his true self or whatever. Whereas John Doyle was like, I am presenter John Doyle today, and can we get these three gentlemen to come out to dinner with us? Which was a really nice gesture, by the way, but it was said in a way that just kind of like makes it seem so inauthentic. Oh God, Dragon Water, why would you say, oh, you said it's better than Carrie's. It's not better than Carrie's. This is a hat that I made a while ago from this place called Knit Collage, that they have this really chunky yarn, and there's all sorts of like sparkly things. There's like fabric yarn in this hat. It's just like a mishmash hat. I thought it would be fun for nitwits, but it's not like a real hat. I don't actually wear it outside or anything. I'm from New Jersey and I had to live through it. Well, I mean, that's your fault for living in New Jersey. No one forced you to live in New Jersey. Come to New Hampshire. It's so much better. But guys, that is all we have for tonight. Now, a couple programming notes. Number one is we are all very hopeful that tomorrow at 6:30, Adam will finally man up and tell his side of the story. I am crossing my fingers and my toes, but I will be meta streaming Adam's tell-all stream tomorrow, starting at 6:30 on this channel. We're going to have a little watch party. There will be some people on Adam's chat that are pissed off at me for doing this. I don't really care. If you want to watch on Adam's channel, go watch on Adam's channel. If you want to watch on mine and kind of like have discussion about the whole thing in a little bit more of a lighthearted way, come over and watch it on mine. I really do hope Adam finds his balls and finally tells this story after 2 fucking years. Alex, you're invited to join me on stream if you would like to join me for the Adam Tell-All meta stream. But that's going to be at 6:30 tomorrow, okay? But before that, at 2 p.m., I will be welcoming Jack Casey onto the channel at 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. And Jack Casey is going to try to convince me to become a flat earther. I thought that would be a nice post-holiday kind of like fun stream. And so that's going to be at 2 p.m. And then I may be doing happy hour on my second channel around 5. I need to work it out because like 3 streams in a day is a fucking lot and I just need to work it out. All right. So pay attention to my Twitter, Dr. Carlin B, or join my locals, kb.locals.com. I will be announcing what I'm doing for streams tomorrow, but definitely at 2 p.m. with Jack Casey, and then definitely at 6:30 for the watch party of Will Adam Tell All. Again, guys, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. This was just to kind of like, blow off some steam, whatever. I made a lot of progress on my border of my shawl. I only have a couple more of these rows and then I get to bind off. Don't worry about those holes in the pink. Those are going to get covered up because like what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Oh, let me find one. Is that this is going to get pulled down to cover up those holes in the pink, and I'm going to make a big fuck off tassel to attach to these loops, and it's going to be fabulous. It's going to look so good. So my shawl is almost done. I'm really excited. Guys, I will see you tomorrow either at 2 p.m. for Flat Earther stream or at 6:30 for Adam watch party. And we're going to send positive vibes to Adam. I want everyone right now to just send positive vibes to Adam. I really want him to tell this story. I know I'm making light of this, but I actually am on Adam's side in this. I think that he is the one that is correct in this situation, and I'm really rooting for him. And I think he's going to feel a lot better once he says his piece. And I really want him to tell his story, and I just want to be entertained by it because it's the holidays, man. We're allowed to be entertained by things. But guys, mount that like button on the way out the door. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you soon. Bye.